Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this virtual Village Board meeting of the Village Board of Arlington Heights to order on Monday, April 19, 2021. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. And I would ask if all would please rise and join the Village Board in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I should say before we call the roll that we are meeting again virtually tonight because it is still not practical or prudent for us to meet in person, but we certainly are hopeful that we will be meeting again in person here in this room very soon. So with that, I would ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Here.
Trustee Padovani?
Here.
Trustee Scaletta?
Here.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Here.
Trustee LaBedz?
Here.
Trustee Canty?
Here.
Trustee Baldino?
Here.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Here.
President Hayes?
Here. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. We have just one set to approve tonight. That's from our Village Board meeting of April 5th, 2021. Are there any changes or passes?
Move approval. Second.
Motion to approve by Trustee Rosenberg, seconded by Trustee Schwingbeck. Any questions or comments from the board or from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Yes.
Trustee Canty?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee Padovani? President Hayes?
Yes. Next, we move on then to the accounts payable, and I would call on, for the last time, Trustee Bert Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. For the final warrant register readout, I would move approval of the warrant register with a check date of April 15, 2021 in the amount of $843,749.09.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Rosenberg, second by Trustee Padovani. Questions or comments from the board or from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee Padovani?
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
Trustee Canty?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. We move on then to recognitions and presentations, and we have some very special recognitions here this evening. With all the turmoil going on around the world, in our country especially, even as we sit here this evening, we are awaiting the verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial. We're dealing with mass shootings, seems like every day. And so we would certainly condemn the use of firearms in any unlawful manner, and I do so in the strongest terms here this evening. And as I say many times, and all too often, it's but by the grace of God we go here in the village of Arlington Heights. So we're just very, very thankful that an incident has not happened in our borders. But with that unfortunate circumstances around us, we're very happy to celebrate a happy occasion here this evening, and that's the retirement of two outstanding public servants in the village of Arlington Heights, retiring trustees Bert Rosenberg and Greg Padovani. Both of these men have served the village in many capacities that I will relate as I read their proclamations, but we had an in-person COVID-19 compliant reception at 4:30 this afternoon for friends and family and others that these two individuals have served with and served over the past many years and in decades in Bert's case. And we're very fortunate that we're able to meet in that way. So we do want to recognize these men with respect to their service to the general public as well. And so we just want to make sure that all of our community knows how outstanding these two individuals have been and the contributions that they have made to our community over many, many years now. I know they will continue to do so in the months and years ahead. But in honor of their service, let me just go ahead and read the proclamation that we read earlier this evening in honor of Trustee Greg Padovani for his 2 years as trustee with the Village of Arlington Heights. Whereas Greg Padovani was appointed as village trustee in January 2019 by Mayor Thomas Hayes to fill a vacant trustee seat and will be leaving the village board upon expiration of that term in May 2021. In addition to his more than 2 years of appointed service as village trustee, Greg has been a longtime community volunteer with an endless list of volunteer service, including as board member of the Arlington Heights Chamber of Commerce and Arlington Park District Foundation, chairman of the Veterans Memorial Committee, the Memorial Day Parade and Ceremony Committee, and the local American Cancer Society Relay for Life, and member of the Village of Arlington Heights Volunteers in Police Service, or VIPS. In all of these roles, Greg has demonstrated his commitment to selfless service for the benefit of others. And whereas Trustee Padovani's many awards and recognitions include Arlington Heights Chamber of Commerce Business Leader of the Year in 2017 and Volunteer of the Year in 2011, Village of Arlington Heights Heart of Gold recipient in 2012, and Illinois Bicentennial Honor 200 recipient in 2018, honoring the community service of only 200 military veterans around the state of Illinois. Whereas Trustee Padovani, as a U.S. Army veteran himself, has made it his personal mission to provide area veterans with valuable information and resources that assist them in overcoming the challenges of daily life. Furthermore, in his role as organizer of the Arlington Heights Memorial Day Parade and Ceremony, Greg provides our community an extraordinary and meaningful opportunity to gather and honor the military service and sacrifice of our veterans, and particularly our fallen heroes that have now earned statewide reputations as second to none. Whereas Trustee Padovani distinguished himself as a hardworking, compassionate trustee whose commitment to the residents and businesses he served was unwavering and reflected his dedication to always doing what he thought was in the best interest of the entire community. Now, therefore, I, Thomas W. Hayes, Mayor, along with the Village Board of Trustees, do hereby recognize and congratulate Trustee Greg Padovani for his many contributions to the Village of Arlington Heights as both village trustee and dedicated community volunteer. Although we know his efforts on behalf of others will continue on, his time on the Village Board will be remembered and dearly missed. Again, Greg, congratulations. Thank you for all you've done for the Village of Arlington Heights. And let me give you an opportunity to say a few words at this time.
Oh, thank you so much, Mayor, for those wonderful words. And thank you to Mayor Hayes, the board, for the opportunity to serve our community. It's been a very high honor for me. And having lived here for 45 years, raised a family with my wife, I thought I knew a lot about Arlington Heights, but I learned so much in the last 2 years. And I've met so many great people, especially the village staff under Randy Recklaus, our village manager, and all the department heads and all the staff I've worked with. I've come away with a tremendous appreciation for how well they do their job and how great they work for our community. Just some top-notch people there with top-notch skills that make it look easy. But I'm also very thankful and blessed to have worked with so many people in our town, across all of our town, businesses and faith community and veterans groups, that I'm just so thankful and blessed to have been able to serve in yet another capacity. And I thank you all very, very much for this opportunity. And I just wanted to say that I feel very confident in stepping away from the board, that this town is in very, very good hands. And I think the great message, or the great world of what Arlington Heights is, will continue on. Thank you so much, Mayor.
Well, thanks, Greg. And I'm going to give the board members an opportunity to speak to their service, to the service of both Greg and Bert when we're done recognizing both individuals. So you can prepare your thoughts at this time. But let me go ahead and recognize Trustee Rosenberg at this time. And by reading this proclamation, the Village of Arlington Heights is very honored and pleased to proclaim April 19, 2021 as Trustee Bert Rosenberg Day in the Village of Arlington Heights. Whereas Bert Rosenberg began his service to the Village of Arlington Heights when he was appointed to the Environmental Commission in August of 1987 by Mayor Jim Ryan. He was subsequently appointed to the O'Hare Noise Compatibility Commission in October 1991 and continued to serve on both commissions, including 5 years as chairman of the ECC until November 2000, when he was appointed by Mayor Mulder to the village board to fill a vacant trustee seat. Bert was subsequently elected and reelected as village trustee 5 times and has served as president pro tem of the board since May 2019. And whereas throughout his public service, Trustee Rosenberg has represented the citizens of Arlington Heights with tremendous passion, diligence, honesty, and accountability. With a professional background as a certified public accountant, Trustee Rosenberg was respected and relied upon by his fellow board members for his keen oversight of the village budget and his attention to detail. His reputation for unwavering commitment to and involvement in the community is a model for all elected officials to follow. And whereas the village accomplished much during Trustee Rosenberg's tenure, including the growth of the downtown as a vibrant entertainment and dining destination and residential hub, the revitalization of key economic areas, infrastructure maintenance and improvement, and the delivery of high-quality village services without overburdening the taxpayers. Trustee Rosenberg's contributions to the village's growth and fiscal stability over his many years of appointed and elected service was both invaluable and instrumental to the successful accomplishment of these goals. Now, therefore, I, Thomas W. Hayes, Mayor, along with the Village Board of Trustees, do hereby proclaim April 19, 2021 as Trustee Bert Rosenberg Day in the Village of Arlington Heights in recognition of his 34 years of dedicated service to the community and thank him for his many contributions along the way. The village is a more desirable place to live, work, and play in because of his active engagement and dedication. Trustee Rosenberg's 3 decades of leadership has left an indelible mark upon both those he has served and those he has served with, and he will be dearly missed. Congratulations, Bert. Thank you for your many, many years of service to the village in one way or another, and the floor is yours. Thanks, Bert.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate all the kind words and the words I heard earlier today at the reception that we had, and wish to congratulate Greg on his service that he has given us over the 2 years that he served as well. You know, I got started in the village, as Mayor said, back in '87 when I asked Marty Agron, who was a former trustee and now judge, for a recommendation on volunteering for the village. And he said, well, go talk to Mayor Ryan. And Mayor Ryan then appointed me to a commission, as the mayor said, the Environmental Commission. Then the mayor, Arlene Mulder, appointed me for 6 months, taking the spot of Frank Gallardo when he left the board in 2000, and then I ran for office. And to my success, 5 terms in the office, as was said. I think we have one of the greatest communities in the country. The board members and administrators and staff I've worked with over the 34 years are, as the mayor uses the phrase, second to none. We have dedicated board members that I have served with over the past years. And we've been able to gain consensus over the years and get along. And I want to thank all of you on the current board now and past board members that I've served with for their service. We all, I think, owe a great thanks to Mayor Hayes for his past years of service as mayor and trustee. And I found that Mayor Mulder kind of set the pace and Tom Hayes just followed right there. So Arlington Heights is considered with very high regard, and that is due to all the people who I serve with and the volunteers on the various boards and commissions, as well as the elected officials. But I think we cannot leave out the dedicated department heads and the staff of the village who I've served with over the years. They are great to work with, and we wouldn't be able to run the village without them. But I think this also beckons to the leadership of Randy Recklaus and formerly Bill Dixon as village managers in their role that they played. One of the things I think that I will miss the most is the people and the relationships that I've been able to form over the past 20 years. I know that several of the staff will not miss me, you know, my questions every week, and especially at budget times and the finance department, the cringing with all the Post-it notes that I put together for the yearly budget meetings. But I think someone will be able to follow in my footsteps and continue on. And I just want to thank my wife, Sandy, my children, Michael and Jonathan, as well as my daughter-in-law, Tara, for all the hours of sacrifice of family time and events that occurred over the years in order for me to perform my village duties. I am so proud to have been a part of this great organization over the last 33 years and never expected to have a day in my honor. So thank you all, and appreciate everything that was done. Be well.
Thanks, Bert. Very well said. Thanks to both of you. I do want to open it up to the village board now for comments. I know all of us have served with these fine men in a number of different capacities, and some longer than others. So I just want to give an opportunity to share and keep it clean. We do have young people watching at this even not too late hour. So Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity. I've known Greg for many years, even before he served on the village board, but I can tell you that his commitment to our community moved forward on the board. And Greg always did his homework and always made sure he understood all the issues. And I appreciate his dedication for the 2 years that he's been on the board. So thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Bert, who I've known for a lot longer and now consider a friend. Bert and I have worked on the board for 14 years now, and throughout those years, Bert taught me how to read the budget. It's a pretty complex document, and from the very beginning, Bert spent the time and explained to me how the budget laid out and how we really function as a village with all the different sources of income and then all the great expenditures that we have. There's two things that stand out about Bert over the years that we worked on together. One of them being the Metropolis Oversight Committee several years ago. And I think that those months that we spent trying to get an understanding of exactly how the Metropolis worked, and because we both believed in Metropolis being an economic engine in the downtown, and we wanted to see it succeed. And I think that those months that we spent together with staff from Metropolis have served the village well. Metropolis is now a financially sound organization with great leadership and a tremendous board that's involved on a regular basis. And I think more importantly than the Oversight Committee was Bert and I, along with some other trustees, worked very, very hard to convince former village manager Bill Dixon and then Tom Canty, director of finance, to change our fiscal year. And I think that that is one of the biggest accomplishments that was achieved over the years, because that changing of our fiscal year has now given us the opportunity to really understand exactly what we are levying in taxes. And I think that that is resulted in savings to the taxpayers, number one, and number two, I don't think that we would have been able to go 2 years at a 0% levy if it had not been for that. So Bert, thank you for all your guidance over the years. I appreciate you. You're definitely a mentor to me on the finance side of the village. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trustee Scaletta. Any other comments from the village board? Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. First, I want to say thank you to Greg for your service. I've known you for years. I don't know how many years, but it's been years. And living as I do, only 3 houses from Memorial Park, I'm sure that's a large part of the reason with your all the hard work you do with veterans, and getting to see you over at Memorial Park on at least once a year, actually, usually much more than that basis. As I said, it's as though I've known you forever. So when Mayor Hayes said to me that he was going to recommend your appointment to fill a vacant seat, I thought, well, of course. Greg is so well positioned with all the things you've done over the years, and with how much you care about this village, that you would be a great trustee. And you have been a great trustee, and I've learned a lot from you, and I really do appreciate that.
Thank you,
and I
Robin.
wish you well. And I know I'll be seeing you and Shar too, because I know you both. And I guess maybe I knew Shar first because we have kids the same age. So, and then I got to know you. And then Bert, I feel like I've known you forever too, although maybe not. It's certainly been quite a number of years though. I will always remember how welcoming and helpful you were to me when I first came on the board, knowing nothing, and how much I appreciate, and as Trustee Scaletta said, learn from you when it came time to do the budget. Thank goodness I could rely on you to read it line by line, because numbers make my eyes go like that, being an HR person, not a finance person. So I appreciate that so much. But both you and Sandy have always been so kind and so welcoming. And I've enjoyed also all the times we've gotten together at other events outside of village board meetings. And I'll especially remember those several evenings in the police station when you were cooking dinner for the Metropolis Gala Award winners, and you prepared gourmet spreads, and I was honored to help, as well as help eat some of the food. So I really appreciate it. But thank you so much, Bert, for all you've done for the village. I will miss you very much on the board, but I know I'll see you and Sandy around.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Trustee Tinaglia.
Thanks, Mayor Hayes. You know, for me, I'll just be really brief, but let you guys know how much I really, truly enjoyed working with both of you men. For such high-strung spirits as you are, you were able to bring it down. And I'm kidding, of course. You guys are so well thought. You come prepared. You can be a friend as well as an advisor. And it's really clear, I think, to anyone who watches that you're here for the village, and that's so respectable. So I appreciate getting to sit next to you, Greg, and talk about things for years. Bert, like the others have said, I feel like I've learned so much from listening to you and trying to, understand some of the things that are hard for most people to understand, but it comes so easy for you. So just thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. I'm honored to have been able to serve with you. Thanks for being there.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim. Trustee Schwingbeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, Bert, I got to know you a little bit back in 2015, and a lot better when I and Mary Beth were put on the board 2 years ago. And you were extremely welcoming to us, made us feel right at home when we came on the board. Always a good voice to bounce things off of, and I really do appreciate that. And I will miss you on the board a great deal. Greg, you and I were put on the board right around the same time. Mm-hmm. And we have spent countless hours on the phone together during the weeks. And one thing I will miss is our phone calls and meetings and discussing personal as well as village issues. You were always a great voice to hear and bounce ideas off of, and I'm going to truly miss you guys and appreciate what both of you brought to this board. And I wish you both best of luck.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Trustee Schwingbeck. All right. Thank you for those comments, fellow board members. And thank you for, again, the service. Trustee Baldino, do you have something to add?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Again, I will be brief. 4 years ago, when I was fumbling about trying to figure out how to run a write-in campaign, one of the first movers and shakers that I met was Greg Padovani. And I was as nervous as could be to talk to Greg, but he has such an easygoing, engaging, welcoming style about him that we had a nice, long conversation about a number of topics, including veterans topics. And that style, it was such a bonus to have on the village board. And as Trustee LaBedz was saying, when the mayor called me up and said that he was going to recommend you to be appointed to the board, I was overjoyed to hear that. And as he said in the reception today, it was just a question of whether or not you'd accept. So thank you for accepting the position on the board. You've been so valued over the past 2 years.
Thank you,
Bert,
Rich.
The best way I can put it, so many wonderful things have been said about you this evening. The best way that I can put it is that you were an example to follow for me. How to conduct yourself as a board member, the way you dug into the details. As has been said before, it has been an honor to serve with you and with Trustee Padovani. And thank you for being that example and for all your years of dedication to the village. Thank you so much, Mayor.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you.
Okay, if nothing else from the board, we are not going to let these two men just ride off into the sunset. We still have some work there for them to do here this evening, and so we will then move on in the agenda, which hopefully will not be too lengthy, but we will certainly see. Thank you all again for your comments this evening. We would then move on to citizens to be heard in the agenda. And Becky Hume, the village clerk, I am not aware of any comments submitted in advance. Is that right?
That's correct, Mayor. There were no comments.
Okay, thank you. And I do see 3 hands raised in the audience. So we'll move to the audience who are joining us virtually for comments to the village board on items not on the agenda. And you're just reminded of the 3-minute time limit. If you could keep your comments to 3 minutes, we would appreciate it, as we do have a perhaps lengthy agenda after citizens to be heard. So the first individual is Stefan Davidkov.
Good evening, Mayor. Would it actually be possible for one of the Hogans to go first? We've been coordinating and collaborating on a certain topic. It would make more sense if they were able to go first.
Sure. Okay. I've got Stephen Hogan next.
Hello, trustees. Can you read me?
We've got you.
Okay, great. Good evening, Village of Arlington Heights trustees. My name is Stephen Hogan, and I speak on behalf of my parents, who are 38-year residents of Arlington Heights, where I myself was raised. Within the past 2 weeks, their home's peaceful and quiet backdrop of a tall and mature tree grove on public land, the reason why they purchased this townhome, was completely gutted without formal notification to them from the village. They now have a clear view of Route 12 rental and its tractors and trucks and noise from Rand Road. As these trees were on public property, such drastic changes to the land would certainly require community input if this action was in the public's best interest following the state of Illinois' Open Meetings Act. With no input from residents and little to no oversight from the village, workers chopped down nearly every tree in this area without a thought of how it would affect the neighbors and properties surrounding it. On Friday, April 16th, my sister Catherine Mosier received all communications on this matter from her Freedom of Information Act request and spoke with Village Manager Randy Reckloss. We understand that there was a request in December to trim the trees from Route 12 rental and the HOA president and property manager. It was agreed to at that time to cut trees 10 feet from the property line. There have been no communications in the 5 months since those communications indicating a change in the scope of the work or plans. As indicated in photos that I have on hand, on Saturday, April 17th, trees were removed well beyond the 10 feet limit as previously communicated to the property manager. Photos show trees were removed at a minimum of 25 feet and at some points 50 feet away from the property lines. It astounds that any individual can mistake 10 feet for a length 5 times as long. The project lead on site told my mother that all the trees removed were dead and needed to be removed. I strongly disagree with his assessment, and as you can see from the photos I have on hand, the trees look to be healthy and strong with full and solid trunks and numerous leaves budding. While we understand that the goal was to ensure the city was not liable for falling branches or trees, the resulting work was done recklessly, excessive, and without reflection upon the impact of the community at large, nor did it follow the agreed upon limits from the HOA president and property manager. Our parents' property was assessed in the fall, and we have asked for an updated assessment. Our realtor has indicated this action will negatively impact the equity of the townhouse since the village took their private and quiet wooded view and replaced it with the clear advantage of heavy equipment and constant road noise from Route 12. This has been devastating for our parents who are shouldering a lot with my father's health and have lost the peaceful sanctuary that they enjoy daily. We demand that the village work to ensure that nothing like this happens again without proper public notice and input. Neighbors should be notified beyond just a select few people. Work aggressively to repopulate the land with mature new specimen of trees. Disciplinary action for the project lead who did not follow the agreed to limits by the HOA in December 2020. My siblings and I, who are advocating on the parents of their behalf, look forward to a discussion to correct this wrongdoing and to ensure that it does not happen again. The start of this meeting had a lot of commentary around the sense of community in Arlington Heights with Trustee Rosenberg and Padovani's retirement. We hope that in the spirit of community for our parents' stress upon them can be remedied. Sincerely, Stephen Hogan.
Right, thank you, Mr. Hogan. Let's take all individuals who want to speak on this subject first, and then I'll have the village manager respond. So who's next? Is it Jane Bourne? Go ahead, Jane.
My name is Jane Bourne. I live at 1584 North Windsor Drive and am speaking about the clean out of the village property on Dryden between Rand and Windsor. The area has always been left natural. Our association did request that the area be cleaned out and the dead trees removed. We were blindsided when it ended up to be a clear cut. The village did a massive clean out, sacrificing some live trees as well as the trees and underbrush that needed removal. The result is that the view for those of us in the 1580 to 1586 building is the Route 12 rental buildings, trucks, and equipment. The noise level from Dryden and Rand has also increased. These factors certainly detract from our property value. We no longer have a pleasant view or the joy of hearing birds sing. So my question, what are the village plans to beautify the area? I would be willing to work with the appropriate agency to make plans for the area once the cleanup is complete. Thank you for your consideration.
All right, thanks, Jane. And back to Stefan.
Good evening. So as you can tell, people are pretty upset about this. For my part, I take lots of walks, especially since the start of the pandemic. I even noticed during the winter, there's lots of tracks around that area, people walking their dogs. Lots of people like to go to that area. And I'm thinking kind of going forward constructively, what can we do to kind of remedy the situation? And I would just like to propose to the board that the area be converted into a prairie pocket. I think that planting native grasses, prairie grasses, and flowers might be a good way to re-beautify the area without recreating that same problem of having trees, lean over fences and possibly become a liability. I mean, I did see from the Freedom of Information request that the Hogans put through that the Public Works Manager is open to suggestions for planting. So I would just propose that be done, that be considered. Again, and I think that rather than planting new trees, that this would be one thing that the board could consider. And I know we're dealing with a lot of things with COVID right now. This might not seem like a priority to a lot of people. So, I mean, I, for one, would also be willing to help out in any way. Either one idea I had was maybe we could speak to the local high school, Hersey High School. They do have an environmental science program that might be interested in participating in some kind of land reclamation project. I also know some places I can get information on prairie grasses and planting it. So I think that's all I have to say. Just I wrote out some notes. Give me one moment. So yeah, I think that's all I had for you all. Thank you. Yeah. So my proposal is just to turn that into a prairie pocket as a remedy for what this has caused. So, all right. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you. I see one other hand from the Hogan family, Cheryl. Cheryl, are you there? You have to take yourself off mute.
Hello. Anyway, hello.
Okay, there we got you now.
Okay, fine. I must disagree with Stefan. He lives not where we live. Grass is not going to help us. We could never even see those buildings back there. They're nothing. I got back there last week. I was in tears. We used to live over on the park on 2121 Brighton. We found this townhouse. If you want to keep retirees in your community, you better start treating us more respectfully. You do nothing for us. You don't have to do our roads. We ask you once in a while to come in there and you make it sound, this is almost like spiteful what you did there, as far as I'm concerned, because every time we've asked you to simple thing to do something about this property that's adjacent to us, you do this. You've done this before. I've been there 20 years before we had a nice home and we had a big field behind us. So when we found this lovely townhouse, which I can't stay there anymore now, we're probably going to have to put it up for sale, because I look out of my townhouse now and I look at nothing but construction and big buildings, and the sun beats down on us now. We have no shade. Every single tree was taken out back there. I was back there Thursday. If I had known this was going to happen, I would have chained myself to a tree back there. This is ridiculous. You men all sitting there patting each other on the back. Why don't you pay attention to what's happening to senior citizens in this town? I'm one of them. And I think this is just contemptible. You're not going to do anything. You're not. We're not going to stay in Arlington Heights. After 40 years, it's bye-bye for me. I don't know what we'll sell our place for, but I can't look at that disaster out there. And grass is not going to cut it. Not going to cut covering all the construction and the noise and the sun that beats on us now.
Okay, Cheryl, thank you for your comments. I see no other hands, so I can first assure you that whatever action was taken was not spiteful of any residents in that area. The village board and myself have been kept apprised of the situation. We're aware of the facts and of the village manager's follow-up, which I would like him to just address briefly now. Mr. Recklaus.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. And I've been in communication with Ms. Hogan and Ms. Mosher, and through email and on the phone, and I'm very aware of their feelings on this. I did, after speaking with Ms. Hogan, take a drive out there myself to see it in person. And I've been speaking a lot with Drew Sabatello, our village forester, on these issues, as well as getting kind of the history of that property and understanding what happened, why it happened, and so forth. And, we did get multiple requests for some cleanup. There were a number of dead trees and dying trees in that area. It's not a kind of maintained area. It's a bit overgrown. We also have had some requests for cleanup from the police department over the years, just because it's an area that has become kind of an attractive area for hangouts. And so when the forestry unit approached it, their intent was to cut a perimeter near the property line so that the dying trees and dead trees would no longer be a threat or a liability issue for our neighbors there on either side. But as they got in there, it's very difficult to access. And so in order for them to get to the trees that were threats, they had to cut down some additional trees in the area. And, there's certainly a lot of different ways that different perspectives on this and different ways that this could have been done. This was the way they approached it. They wanted to make sure that they could safely take down those trees that were threats. The forestry unit is absolutely intending on planting some new trees to replace the trees that were dead that were removed. And they absolutely are willing to continue correspondence with the homeowners association. They've been in correspondence with the homeowners association since last spring on this issue, as well as the other adjacent properties. We had to get their feedback and input on good locations for planting from their perspective. But obviously we have to be thoughtful where we plant trees. We have to make sure that they're going to go on locations where they can thrive long-term. We have to pick species that we think will do well in that environment. But we'll definitely be reaching out to the homeowners association and neighbors before we determine any locations. And that's something that will be underway over the next, several weeks and months. But we are aware that some people are unhappy with the work that was done, and we'll continue to work with the residents in that area to create a space that hopefully can be easily maintained, but also provide some of that shade element in that environment that the residents had come to enjoy.
Right. Thanks, Mr. Recklaus. I think the issue has been addressed, and I know Mr. Recklaus and other staff members intend to follow up. And so hopefully the residents who spoke tonight are satisfied with that. I see Cheryl Hogan has raised her hand. Cheryl, I'm going to give you 30 more seconds, and then we have to move on in the agenda. Go ahead, Cheryl.
You've seen the pictures. My daughter sent you the pictures. There were over 100 trees taken down back there. They were some dead trees, but I know that woods, and they were not the trees. There is one hardwood tree left back there. There's a couple of scrawny little skinny trees. That's what's left back there. Now you're going to have to, what are you going to put a couple of trees back out there? You took 100 trees down back there.
All right, Cheryl, we're going to have to move on. We appreciate
fine.
you.
I'm done as well. Anyway, I'm so upset about this that I can't, whatever. Good luck, Arlington Heights Village.
Well, thank you for bringing this to our attention. As the village manager indicated, there will be additional follow-up regarding this situation and this area. So thank you for your comments this evening. Are there any other members of the audience who wish to address the village board on an item not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll move on then in the agenda to old business, and there is none. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. Are there any members of the board who wish to vote no or pass on any item on the consent agenda? Any members of the audience wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Seeing none, are there any members of the board who wish to vote no or pass on an item on the consent agenda? Did I already ask that? All right. Trustee Tinaglia moved approval. Who said? Seconded by Trustee Canty. Any other questions or comments from the board or from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. We move on then to new business, and we do have one item to consider tonight. That's the request for an amendment to the Plan Unit Development, or PUD, Ordinance 19-019 to allow modifications to the previously approved development to be located at Highland Campbell Chestnut, otherwise known as Arlington Block 425, and a special use permit to allow a private garage customer/employee on the subject property. Before we move on, I would like to call on Trustee Tinaglia.
Thanks, Mayor Hayes. I'd like to recuse myself going forward tonight because my firm, Tinaglia Architects, is the designer of the buildings. I will sign off completely and be prepared to re-sign in for the closed session later tonight.
All right, thank you, Trustee Tinaglia. All right, if nothing further from the board, we will go to the petitioner. And who will be the spokesman for the petitioner tonight? Mr. Fursell?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to congratulate the newly elected officials of the village, or in this case, 3 re-elected officials within the village, and Mayor Hayes. I know you ran a tough campaign. Trustees Padovani and Rosenberg, congratulations to you. Bert and I go back. Bert, I figured it out today, almost 50 years to, let's call it, our childhoods.
Yes.
It's been a pleasure to appear before both of you, as well as the rest of the board. You're the ultimate professionals, both of you, and as a petitioner's counsel, I respect the work that you do and appreciate your consideration and attention to all matters Arlington Heights.
Thank you.
That said, we're before you this evening. If I can use the screen share, let's see if it will allow me. I'm ready if we can do the screen share over here. There we go. Okay. Is everybody able to see the introductory slide? I want to make sure.
We've got it.
Okay, thank you. So we're here tonight to present a modification to a previously approved ordinance approving the PUD for what is known as Arlington 425. Before you is one of the slides you'll be seeing showing some of the modifications that will be discussed. Before moving on, let me tell you that through various iterations and PDFs and JPEGs, and unfortunately, due to the fact that we are presenting items virtually, some of the color of some of these buildings do not reveal the true and exact colors that were we in person, we would be able to project. Most of them are consistent. The red brick on the garage isn't quite that red, but you see certainly a different look of this project. First and foremost, I'm not going to represent the whole thing. I know you are all very familiar with it, but one thing I do want to point out is this is the same project essentially that you approved. The site plans, they look the same. They are not. One is a site plan approved. The one on the left is the site plan that was approved in 2019. And the one on the right is the site plan we are asking for approval this evening. So as far as the layout of the site, coverage, and all other things, it's pretty close or almost identical. So what are we doing? We cannot afford to build this project in a productive fashion with the cost of the glass floors above the parking garage known as the Highland Building. So basically, we are removing those floors. But overall, we are fully compliant with all density, height, and parking requirements. So what we're doing is we are cutting out, going from 100, about, Bert, help me here, 42 units less. Right. From 361, you're gonna be this, Bert, from 361 to 319 units. One of the biggest changes is that office, retail, restaurants is being downsized from over 43,000 feet to under 8,000 feet. The tallest building, which was the Highland Building, went all the way up to the highest code allowed with the allowances given. And now the tallest building will be the Highland Building, will be the Campbell Building. The Highland Building will now be a 4 or 5 story parking garage. We will be reducing the parking spaces mostly as a result of the reduction of the number of levels of the Highland Garage from 539 overall spaces to 389. So on the Highland Building, we're removing 6 stories containing 125 residential apartments. The top or 13th amenity floor has been removed. The 6-level garage containing 454 spaces, and the difference between the 454 and the 537 were the 83 spaces, or were the spaces that were going under the Chestnut Building. It's now 4 levels containing 345 spaces, so it's 109 parking spaces less. There is no retail at all in the Highland Building, and the total height has been reduced from 140 feet to now 31 feet, 109-foot reduction in height. We have heard comments about how the new building or the Highland Building is approved, created glare, created shadows, blocked the sun. That will now all be removed. So on the Campbell Building, when we were marketing, we found no market for office retail on the 2nd floor of that building and on the west side of the 1st floor of that building. So in order to make up some of the 125 units we had removed from the Highland Building, we have put 26 apartments on the 2nd floor to replace the previously approved office and retail. And we have added 1 additional 10th floor containing another 26 apartments. So we now have 234 apartments in the Campbell Building as opposed to 182. As you can see, that one building contained up to 28,650 feet of retail office. Now, again, 7,964, all of which will be on the east side of the 1st floor of the Campbell Building. We are also proposing an elevated cover entry or sky bridge across to the Highland Garage. The Chestnut Building, the look is identical. The only change is that, again, in order to recover some of the units that were lost when we removed the 125 units from the Highland Building, is we reconfigured some of the units to make them a little smaller and added other units. So we now have a total of 85 units proposed in the Chestnut Building on 5 floors. The underground parking, again, reduction from 83 to 44 spaces. So all in all, you have a reduction in automobiles, parking, units, traffic, and density, and of course, height. So we wanted to show you what some of the buildings now look like. And I'm going to go through these rather quickly because I have a comparison to show you. But that is, in essence, the beautiful building on Campbell Street. It's as if we took one of the middle floors and simply inserted it into the deck right in the middle. Nothing else on this building has changed. This was the first slide that you saw at the introduction. You can see that behind this is our proposed 4-level parking garage. And behind that to the east is the existing 5-level Vale Street garage. The aerial view you can see is entirely different, with the top level of the Highland garage, or the 4th level of the Highland garage. I believe this depiction may be a 5th level. You will hear about these alternatives later, but we are requesting tonight a 4-level garage. The tops of the other 2 buildings are, again, exactly the same, with 1 floor added to each. So here are the before and after pictures. On the left, on all of the next few slides, you will see what was approved. And on the right, you will see what it looks like today from these various perspectives. I think the pictures totally speak for themselves. Of course, this is the Campbell Building, and in the background, you can see only the parking garage with no 6-level parking garage, and of course, the taller tower behind it. Again, the most compelling is a view from the west, especially folks living across on Chestnut. Instead of looking over into the massive tower, will now simply be looking across the street. Yes, it's about 10 or 11 feet taller, but certainly the mass of the entire Highland building is gone. This is the perspective from, I believe, the south. Again, you can see how compelling the difference is to the overall density, bulk, and mass of this project. Whoops. And of course, here is the view as if you're in the courtyard of the circle area inside of the development, looking at the Highland building. On the left is, of course, the Highland building with the units on top, and now you're looking at a 4-level deck. On the right, you can see the Chestnut building, now 5 stories rather than the 4 that are shown. And again, a view from the, I guess this is the northwest. You can see the entirely different look of the project without the mass of that building, the Highland building, being there. So basically, this is what we are proposing. Our architects team is here. Our Bruce Adriani, the developer, owner of the project, is here. We're here to answer any questions, but we think that with the reduction in density, parking, traffic, mass, unit counts, it's a better project. One thing I do want to point out is that, and although it is in all of the staff reports, since this project was approved, the village has passed an affordable housing ordinance. The affordable housing ordinance was generally at least as to the number of units to live in, and for a fee in lieu, the same as was approved in 2019. After our meeting at the Affordable Housing Commission, the ownership decided that we would fully comply with all aspects of the Affordable Housing Ordinance as passed in 2020. And we have submitted a letter to the village so stating. I would also like to point out that we have appeared before the Design Commission with unanimous recommendation for approval, the Plan Commission with unanimous recommendation for approval based on a couple of modifications that of course you see in your packets. And we are asking the village board to help us make this project affordable, buildable, and for you to approve the amendment to the PUD this evening. Thank you for your time. And of course, we are more than happy to answer any questions any members of the board or public might have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fursell. Before we go to the board for questions or comments, let's go to our planning staff, Mr. Perkins.
Good evening, Mayor and board members. I'll just share a presentation and walk through the staff's recommendation and the Plan Commission. So as Mr. Fursell had mentioned, the developer is seeking an amendment to the original approval, plus a special use approval for the private garage for the residents and the customers and employees. There are no new variations that are requested. However, it is important to remind everybody that there were 5 or 6 variations that were originally granted. These dealt with setbacks for the Chestnut building, the Campbell building, and the Highland building. Also a land use variation and a use variation to allow the Chestnut building to be a strictly residential building. And then some screening variations on the south, as well as the right-of-way variation where the Vale Avenue garage is along Highland. And the reason I bring this up, there was a lot of discussion at the Plan Commission about how the village could ask for certain things. And it's important to remember that the project relies on these variations, even though they were already granted. And as everybody's aware, the criteria for variation approval is that these 4 criteria, that the development is in character and compatible with the adjacent community and area, that the very unique and in harmony with the surroundings. In particular, the plan unit development, this is an amendment, does allow for variations if the development exceeds minimum standards as spelled out in the village code. And then lastly, the special use criteria for the parking garage requires that it be deemed necessary for the convenience at this location, which it is for the proposed development, that it's not detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of anyone residing or within the adjacent vicinity, which goes to the amount of parking and making sure that parking works. And then thirdly, that the development would comply with any stipulations or conditions as authorized by the village board. So these weren't really talked about at the Plan Commission, but it's important to keep those in mind as we talk about a couple of things, in particular parking. Just to recap, we've heard from some members of the public. I just wanted to recap on the process that Arlington 425 has gone through. They started in mid-November, appearing before the comprehensive plan, the conceptual plan committee. They then held a neighborhood meeting in mid-December, submitted their application around the 3rd week of January for the various department reviews, and then in March had the Housing Commission, Design Commission, and Plan Commission hearings that Mr. Fursell referenced. There were 4 primary issues that were discussed in the staff reports that I'll just highlight briefly here. First, the primary development changes. Second, there was a lot of discussion about the service area and location of one of those service areas. Thirdly, parking, and then fourth, the affordable housing. So with respect to the primary changes, Mr. Fussell explained most of those, so I will skip through this slide. The heights of the building change. So the Chestnut building changes from 47 feet in height to 58. The Campbell building goes from 101 feet to 111. And the Highland building changes from 140 feet in height to 44 feet if it's a 4-story garage, or 54 feet if it's a 5-story garage. Keep in mind the garage has some tower elements. There's a design feature on it, so that includes that. This graphically represents the buildings on the block. To the south is the Sigwalt 16 development. It's a 3-story building that's being built under construction. It's 44 feet in height. The Chestnut building is set back 17 feet from the new right-of-way line for the Sigwalt 16 development. The proposed Chestnut building here is set back 12 feet from the new right-of-way line, as was originally approved in 2019. The downtown master plan calls for the north 3/4 of the block to be 6 to 8 stories in height, and the southern quarter of the block, which is the R7 Sigwalt 16 development, to be 4 to 6 stories. So the Chestnut building along Chestnut being 5 stories in height is consistent with the downtown master plan. The Campbell building being a 10-story building proposed now isn't consistent with the downtown master plan, but is consistent with the B5 zoning district that would allow up to 140 feet in height with density bonuses, and is also lower and less dense than what was originally approved. This image shows a cross-section. On the top is the proposed development. If you were on the west side of Chestnut, the angles that you would see walking on the sidewalk or in the home, and on the southern would have been, on the south part of the slide is what was originally approved with the taller building, clearly visible on the west side of Chestnut. These next graphics show quite well the changes. This is 2019 rendering, and this is the 2021. So you can see a significant decrease in the height on the Highland building, and you can see the increase on the Chestnut and the Campbell buildings. Again, this is the street view rendering that Mr. Fussell showed that was approved in 2019, and this is the current proposal. Again, the Chestnut building increasing a height and the Campbell building increasing a height. There was quite a bit of discussion at the Plan Commission about one of the service areas along Highland. Staff had recommended the first go around that this service area be relocated on the interior court. At that time, the Highland building had commercial and other elements in the building that went up above. And so Plan Commission and the Village Board concurred with keeping that service area in this location. This plan is a little different, and we're always conscious of preserving the most precious parking spaces that would be used by this development and by the general public downtown, and to also help reduce congestion on Highland and reduce turning conflict movements. So this shows the loading areas for the Arlington 425 development. It's very well planned with a number of loading areas off the internal court, one between the two buildings, loading area just on the north side of the proposed garage, and then a loading area for what we've been told as refuse, garbage pickup, and also storage of other items for maintaining the garage. In order to get refuse to this storage area from the Campbell building, this is the refuse area in the Campbell building, it would have to be wheeled out across the courtyard, through the garage, and to this location. I'm not sure that it's possible to back a garbage truck into this area, given the heights of the garage. Based on the elevations, the garage indicate about 11-foot first floor height. I'm not sure exactly what the height would be at this area. So the concern is if a garbage truck is about 30-foot long, impacting the Highland Avenue area. Staff's proposal would be to move that storage and service area to this location with some nicely designed doors that front onto this service area. This shows all of the access points into the property and along Highland Avenue. As you can see, the development has good access off Highland Avenue at this location, as well as through the Porte Cochere on Campbell Street, with an exit onto Chestnut, and then ingress egress to the garage from the internal courtyard and also from the southern access point at this location. This is the service area that we were talking about, across the street from the two exit and entrance ramps on the Vale garage. There's also the service area of the Metropolis development, an alley and additional driveways along Highland, plus the new driveway from Sigwell 16. So we're just concerned about potential conflicts with anything backing into that service area when it's a nice, easy movement in this particular area. There was also discussion about only losing 3 parking spaces. In reality, this was presented 2 years ago. There are 18 spaces that are being lost to provide access to the site. And as with most downtown developments, you do need to lose some parking spaces to access the site, as I've shown here, which again is well designed and certainly makes sense. We're just trying to preserve as many on streets as possible. Moving on to parking, this is the more complicated discussion. So the Staff Development Committee, when they were reviewing the proposal, originally the plan was for a 4-story garage for 234 units with, I think, 345 parking spaces. And then original proposal was a surface parking lot on the southwest corner of Chestnut and Campbell. That's an existing surface parking lot. And then 44 underground parking spaces. Staff had concerns about the surface parking across the street on the southwest corner of Campbell and Chestnut. We felt the phase 1 with 234 units was parkable and met the ratios that we've been looking at, that we studied for this development 2 years ago, and also the ratios that were looked at for other developments downtown, such as Village Green, when that was built back in the late 90s. We had a conversation, or I had a conversation with Mr. Fussell and said we could support the phase 1, but we didn't feel that phase 2 had enough parking with just 44 spaces underground for the additional 85 units. Mr. Fussell and his team proposed a potential 5th level and asked if we could develop a scenario where that could be administratively approved under certain criteria without having to go back through the whole public hearing process. And we felt there was a way to do that. And that's reflected in the staff report. The Plan Commission didn't agree with all of those recommendations and recommended approval of the development with either the 5th level garage or only the 44 underground parking spaces. So I'll walk through a little bit of what the implication of what that is. This chart shows the Village Code parking analysis. So on the left is the combined parking analysis, just as we discussed 2 years ago. The Village Code and what the actual demand is actually higher than the Village Code. So in this case, the combined 2 buildings exceeds code by 79 spaces. 2 years ago, it exceeded code by 112 spaces. Just the Campbell building, just the Chestnut building on its own with 85 units has a code deficit of 46 spaces. So the proposal to accommodate the parking for both the commercial and the residential that we had worked out, at least for the phase 1, was for 56 designated spaces for the commercial, the employees, valet, customers, and then the remainder, which is 289, would be designated for the residential use and their guests. So as we understand, customers could come into the garage, get a ticket, they would need to get that ticket validated. Employees and valet parking could park in this area. And the upper levels are just showing the reserved residential parking at 289 under the 4-story garage, or 379 under a 5-story garage. So I'll go through these charts very quickly. These are the same charts we ran 2 years ago. These show an hour by hour allocation of the parking demand for the various uses, the retail, restaurant, and the residential, and show overall surplus and deficit, surpluses and deficits. But keep in mind, not everybody can park in these spaces. So when you break out the surplus and deficit for the individual use allocations, it changes a little bit. And I have 3 summary charts at the end that'll hopefully explain this. So the areas in yellow that are highlighted, these are the peak demands for residential and commercial. The first was during the week. This is at the weekend for the phase 1 development with 345 spaces. So you can see under this scenario overall, there are surpluses, but on the individual uses, it just meets the demand. Then we looked at the next phase with just the 44 underground spaces being added and the additional 85 units. And you can see in the evening, starting at 6 o'clock, starts to run some deficits in the garage, and the same during the weekends. Then if we look at the 5th level option, where you add 90 additional spaces, coming up with 435 spaces, then the deficits overall are a little bit lower, still at 7 and 8 p.m., just a handful of spaces. And again, these are just projections. These next slides are the developers' traffic consultant slides taking the ITE standards. And that is the Institute of Traffic Engineers. So they took the ITE standards. Their commercial demand is very similar to ours. Their residential demand is a little bit lower. And they were looking at a supply of 425 spaces under this particular chart. And again, they did a weekday and a weekend. And I'll just jump to, before I jump to the summary, the traffic consultant for the developer also provided a couple of dozen examples of other developments in and around the Chicago area and what their ratios were for parking. And overall, the average was 1.26 spaces per unit for parking. Our studies that we did with Rich and Associates a couple of years ago was at 1.3. Keep in mind, a couple of these are in Evanston, where they have CTA. Most comparable probably is the Uptown LaGrange development, which is not far from their train station, which is at 254 units and a ratio of 1.32. So just summarizing all of those charts that I just went through, I know it's a lot, but this chart shows the phase 1 with the 234 units and the 345 space 4-car garage. It assumes 222 units are parked in the Highland garage and 12 of the affordable units are parked in the Vale Avenue garage. And the allocation for the commercial is 56 spaces. The staff peak demand for the commercial was 60. KLOA, the developer's traffic consultant, their peak demand for commercial was 64. So the commercial is very close between staff and the developer's consultant. The residential, the allocation is 289 spaces, and the staff peak was 289, and the KLOA peak on those charts using ITE was 276. So the surplus, if I can get the mouse to work to show you, bear with me a second, but the surplus here under the staff analysis is 0, and under KLOA is 13. That's just on phase 1. But when you go to phase 2 and add the 44 underground spaces and the 85 units, you see in red the surpluses for the residential, because the residential technically, it's not a fully open garage, so can't fully park in the commercial spaces. Otherwise, at certain times during the day, there wouldn't be sufficient parking, as I illustrated in those earlier charts. So the supply is 333, and this shows some higher deficits in the evening. And this is why staff recommended the staged approach that could be evaluated by staff and the village board without going back through the approval process that I'll talk about in a moment. And then lastly, phase 2 option 2 with the 90 space additional on the 5th level. This now starts to get closer to meeting the demand based on the staff projections and shows a surplus of 2 spaces for the residential under the KLA study. Again, all these scenarios assume the 16 affordable units are parked in the Vale Avenue garage. So talking about the affordable housing requirements. So as Mr. Fussell mentioned, the developer has agreed to comply with the inclusionary zoning ordinance. The main difference between that and what was approved previously is the unit mix, the timing and payment of certain fees, and there's certain incentives that are allowed under the ordinance, which are at the discretion of the village board. And I just want to make sure the board concurs with this. This is relief on the affordable housing units to allow the parking for those units on at a 1 space per unit basis. The village could always allow more within the Vale garage, and then a proportional waiver of permit fees for just the affordable units, excluding any out-of-pocket permit fees. So the inclusionary zoning ordinance requires 5% of units as was the original approval. The fee does go up every year based on the CPI. The inclusionary zoning ordinance allows the board to permit parking for the affordable on-site units, specifically states 1 permit would be permitted for each affordable unit, and then the waiver of the fees. So the board does need to concur with those 2 actions. This is from the dashboard on the parking guidance system, and it's at 2 a.m. in the morning, and it's from January 1st through April 5th that shows the available parking in the Vale Avenue garage, primarily on the 2nd and 3rd levels, which are the kind of bottom 2 lines. So the level 2 is 95% occupied on average every day during this time period, but there are 10 spaces available. Level 3 is 77% occupied, but there are 64 spaces available. So just on level 2 and 3, staff is comfortable that there is parking available for the affordable units that we just talked about. This slide shows the only changes that the Plan Commission made between the Staff Development Committee recommendation. The green is the additional language and the red is the language that was stricken. So Staff Development Committee had recommended the phase 1 with the allocation of the 56 commercial spaces and the 289 for the residential. Staff Development Committee had recommended phase 2 could be built at any time, almost the 5th level of the parking garage, whether that was with the original development or on its own or in conjunction with the Chestnut building. What we differed on was that we didn't feel that 44 spaces for just the Chestnut building was sufficient without additional documentation and data. And we had recommended additional data and studies once the Campbell building is built to demonstrate whether a lower parking ratio is feasible. And so we had kind of taken that tiered or stepped approach in our recommendation. So I do have all of the conditions that the Plan Commission recommended. So staff did recommend approval of the development. We think it's an important site, important development for downtown. And the Plan Commission did recommend approval as well with those 2 modifications. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I'll be happy to remove the slide share, Mayor.
All right, thanks, Mr. Perkins. They said there would be no math. So these numbers are swimming around in my head, and we'll have to see if we can make sense of them here this evening. Mr. Fussell, let me just go to you for the first question. Are there any conditions of the Plan Commission recommendation that the developer does not concur with at this time?
No, we fully concur with 100% of the recommendations of the Plan Commission.
Okay, and Mr. Perkins, what disagreement does the staff have? Again, if you could summarize.
I think that the main concern we had was with the Plan Commission recommendation that allows the Chestnut Building, 85 units to be built with just 44 additional spaces without proving that up. Based upon our ratios and even KLOA's ratios, which the average was 1.26. Under that scenario, the average is 1.09 in spaces per unit for the allocated residential parking in the Highland Garage. So that's our concern. If it can be proved up, through additional studies after the Campbell Street building has been built, that was part of our recommendation to allow that to occur, and staff would review that, and then it could be discussed by the village board. We were not proposing that it go back through the whole public hearing process again. So that was the reason for, the approach that we had taken.
And what about the garbage service area? Was that an issue with the staff as well?
Yes, we had recommended that be relocated on the north side of the garage. That's more convenient to the Campbell building and to just preserve those additional spaces in the Highland Avenue and to eliminate congestion on Highland.
Okay, and the Plan Commission had no issue with what the petitioner was proposing with respect to that issue?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Well, just for my 2 cents, I'm very happy that the petitioner has stuck with this project. We are very happy that you've come back to us. And hopefully this will result in a better project for you, for us, and for all concerned. And I am one of many, I know, that want to see a shovel in the ground as soon as possible. So with that, I will turn it over to the board for questions or comments. As they say, who has the first question? Trustee LaBedz.
Okay, I'll start. I have a few questions and a comment. I noticed reading through that you propose a change in apartment mix, more studios and 1 bedrooms and fewer 2 bedrooms. Is that based on the market, that sort of thing? And does this have then the impact on these parking numbers? Somebody?
I'll wait till the mayor calls on me if he wants me to answer.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Purcell.
Okay.
Thank you.
First of all, on the unit count, versus the parking, it has very, very little impact. The parking ratios for a studio or 1 bedroom under the village code is 1 parking space for a studio and 1 parking space for a 1 bedroom. For a 2 bedroom, it's 1.25 units, 1.25 spaces per unit. So if we have more bedrooms and fewer 2 bedrooms, it would require more parking, because if you have 3 1 bedrooms versus 2 2 bedrooms, it's 3 spaces versus 2.5. However, the numbers based on the reallocated number of units is minimal. It has very, very little impact, because we prepared our analysis not based on the ratios the staff did. We prepared our analysis based on the village code. That's all we have to go on, is the village code. And the village code is clear, succinct, easily determinable. However, apparently it holds no water in this case with the staff, because notwithstanding the code, there are concerns about not having enough parking. So Trustee LaBedz, there is more than sufficient parking, whether we do more studios or more 2 bedrooms or less 2 bedrooms and more 1 bedrooms. There's nothing carved in stone about the 85 units in the Chestnut Building. This is a two-phase project. If it's determined that condominiums are a better use of this property, it would certainly not be 85. It would be a significantly lower number. And if we find the market switches to a demand for 2-bedroom versus 1-bedroom or studio, we may very well ask to reallocate the layout of the units and ask for more 2-bedroom and fewer studios or 1-bedrooms. So,
So at this time, you're comfortable with that? The demand
Yes.
will be here for what you're proposing at this point. Is kind of really what I'm getting at.
We absolutely are.
Okay, and the parking garage, so initially, just so I understand, initially, you're proposing the 4 stories, correct?
Correct.
And if there's a 5th story, that means it's not that you're going to build more of a structure, so that you'll have parking on the top level? Is that how you?
No.
Or will that be a covered area?
No.
That's what I'm trying to understand.
Okay, and thank you for your questions. All this parking can be a little bit confusing. We are asking for a 4-level deck at this time, containing 345 spaces on 4 levels. We would like the option, even at this time, to make it a 5-level deck. If it's determined that instead of incurring the cost in the future of adding on to a 4-level deck, it will be cheaper to build all 5 levels now, we may very well build a 5-level deck, which is apparently what staff wants to see. Okay, and should we decide to build spaces under the Chestnut Building in addition to a 5-level deck, it'll be even more parking. So our ask today is for a 4-level deck and 44 spaces under the Chestnut Building, with the option to build a 5-level deck today and not have to put any spaces under the Chestnut Building if we make it all apartments.
Okay, but I guess part of what I'm just wanting to understand is it will all be covered, whether it's 4 or 5. The top level will not be open air.
It will be open air.
The top, if you have 5, the top level will be open air. If you have 4, it'll be enclosed.
It'll be open air.
Oh, it'll still be open.
Yes,
But
ma'am.
but you would build it strong enough in case you chose to add on to that.
If we don't build a 5-level deck initially, the structure will be able to afford an add-on 1 level in the future. Yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to understand. And I'm, no offense, but I'm not going to miss that really tall glass building over the garage. It was not my favorite part, if you remember.
I do.
And I was worried about the birds migrating, so you probably remember that too. But I do think it actually is a more attractive project the way you have it at this point. And also, I can understand why you would eliminate the 2nd floor of the commercial and the office space and the Campbell building. It actually sounds like a sensible move based on the market. And as you mentioned, the difficulty you would have to fill those with anything other than residents. As far as the 1st floor, you're still kind of anticipating, as far as the commercial space, a possibility of a restaurant. Would it be, I'm not that, it's close to 8,000 square feet. I don't know, it's because I'm not a developer, how much, whether you would combine a restaurant, whether it would be all restaurant, or you would just see what the market brings you. I'm just curious about that.
That's a very good question. The plan for the east side of the 1st floor has not changed at all from the original plan. We had proposed 3,500 square feet of regular retail, and the balance 40-some hundred feet would be a restaurant. We hope a high quality restaurant. We're not talking fast food or quick carryouts or anything like that. In the restaurant, there would be 3,000 feet of seating space. So the rest would be back of the house, bathrooms and, mechanicals and everything else. We are not proposing the use of the lower level below the retail for any commercial uses whatsoever. So that has been removed from the plan. That would be storage or building amenities and or building systems below that. So that hasn't changed. So we are still very, very anxiously awaiting approval so we can market the restaurant space, because you certainly have a shortage of restaurants in Arlington Heights, and I think we need to add a few more.
Yes, the more the merrier.
I think it's great.
Yeah. And then I have a question about the loading area for the Chestnut building. When I don't remember if it was, I guess it was when Charles was showing that there's in the interior is where you would have, I guess let me kind of reverse this question. I'm concerned about having commercial vehicles stop on Chestnut Street, given the narrowness of it, for package delivery or even move in and move out. So do I understand it correctly that that will all occur on the interior of their property?
No, what would happen is when a garbage truck goes down Chestnut Street on pickup day, when it picks up the garbage of everybody who lives on Chestnut, it will back down the ramp to the Chestnut building. We will have a pulley system that we can certainly have Deb Smart, our property management consultant, speak to, that will pull the carts up, dump them in the truck, and they'll pull out straight and continue on their route. So they would be sitting on Chestnut Street for as long as it takes to put the truck in reverse and back down the ramp.
And
very momentarily.
And things like move in and move out would occur inside?
What we would do, no, on the Chestnut building, there is, as you might see, there are parking along Chestnut, but it's now, due to the dedication, the parking is not going to be out in the middle of Chestnut. It'll be recessed. And so we will make arrangements when someone wants to move in and move out to reserve that area, cone it off or something for a moving truck to be able to park in for a move in or move out. Keep in mind that these are smaller units. You're not going to have one of those big Mayflower or Allied huge trucks sitting there parking. These are one, maybe two bedroom, maybe a studio unit where the truck is much smaller. So they will be able to be accommodated, and they would not block traffic along Chestnut.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, I want to make a comment, and I want to thank you for your agreement to adhere to the affordable housing ordinance, our new affordable housing ordinance. It's something that's very important to me, very important to this community, and I appreciate that we're going to have these units. And I think it's also important because really you're the first development to do this, and it will then, going forward, I think, allow the village to say, well, if this project can adhere to the ordinance, we can say to the next developer who's kind of hemming and hawing, you can do it too. So I really appreciate that, and I would be in favor of the request to have those units parked in the Vale garage, and I think it was a reduction in fees for those units, which is one of the questions coming before us. So I would be in favor of that. So those are the questions and comments that I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Trustee LaBedz. Trustee Schwingbeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Charles, I did have a question for you on the Highland area. And then while Trustee LaBedz was talking, I also wanted to ask Mr. Purcell something. But on the Highland side, having gone over there many times and looked at that wall on the west side of our parking garage, there's several panels that are bolted to the concrete where you can easily remove those panels, those knockout panels. So I'm assuming back when our garage was built, there was some intention of removing those so that whatever happened on that property, the developer could have access to that property, since the garage goes all the way up to within, inches on one side and a foot on the other.
Yes, that is correct. All the public meetings that we had in 2003 and 2004 that involved discussions with Norwood Builders and Banbury Properties and others downtown, that it was designed to allow those spandrel panels to be removed should they need to be. Okay.
And I guess the one question I had, and I remember as I was sitting, I think on the 31st, listening to the Planning Commission meeting for those 3.5 hours, there was a reason, I believe, that the petitioner wanted that loading of the garbage trucks on Highland versus on the north side. And, even today, there was a truck sitting on Highland for 45 minutes or so, where these garbage trucks, I really see them going in and out and unloading that garbage quickly. But I guess I would like to hear one more time why the petitioner wanted that garbage and utility in the middle of the building on Highland versus the north end of the building.
Yes, I'm more than happy to answer that. First of all, this is not new. This was approved with the original ordinance. We have not changed this portion of the ordinance. So I'm not trying to be curt, but I have no idea why we're discussing this, because this was part of the plan in 2019 and the board voted for it. Plan Commission recommended it. They recommended it again this time. How we internally lay out the use of our internal property for the function of our property, we believe should be not governed or dictated by the village. I don't mean to try to assert some sort of right here that I don't think we have, but the fact that our building managing consultant, our consulting management engineer, the fact that we don't want garbage trucks on the interior brick paved roadway on the interior of this project. We're spending millions of dollars on this courtyard area. And so now staff is suggesting, let's back your garbage trucks in there to access the site. We don't even know if the turning radius will work. The point is that you may have also heard at the Plan Commission that it takes up 3 spaces, this additional access point. And so it's an inconvenience to 3 parkers. And when asked if there's sufficient room on the 3rd and 4th level of the Vale garage for those same 3 parkers, the answer was a quick, absolutely there is. So we didn't come here to have things we were previously approved taken away. We came here to try to make this project work. And I'm here to tell you that this project does not work for us, where staff would like to save 3, quote, precious, unquote, village parking spaces. Thank you, Charles. On a street where you got 18 spaces remaining out of the 25 that were manufactured as a result of this addition to the garage. So it's very, very important to us to have them there for the reasons stated at the Plan Commission and that I've just stated.
I took some notes though, and I thought they were accurate. On the north end of the garage, over by that courtyard,
Yes, sir.
wasn't that where you were going to put a number of handicap parking spots?
Exactly. And we were told those handicap parking spots could be relocated further from the elevators and the entrance to the Highland, to the Campbell building.
Okay.
Okay, which we felt was detrimental, not advantageous to those handicap parking residents or guests to the retail.
And Mr. Frisell, I thought I understood the parking extremely well until Trustee LaBedz asked a question. But at 345 parking spots, if the Chestnut building were to be apartments, you had talked about 85 rental units.
That's correct.
I was under the understanding at the Planning Commission meeting that if those were rental units at 85, that you would build a 5th floor on the parking garage. That you wouldn't put it under, you would put it underground only if it were condos.
No, that's not what we discussed, nor what the ordinance stated. If I could ask to use my shared screen again, I think I can answer that question for you.
Okay, because I was under the impression that it was 345 plus another 91. So at 436, you'd be 90 spots over code.
No, that's not what was presented nor what was approved. I'm sorry, Trustee Schwingbeck.
Okay, so just go over that one more time.
Sure. If I could share the screen. Oh, there we go. Just have to hit share. Okay, so as you might have seen, I had extra slides. So very quickly to go through this and to capture this very quickly.
Mike, we're not seeing your
Mike,
slides
we're not-
currently.
Oh, you're not seeing the slide?
We see your
No.
background picture.
We got the
How's
foreground.
that? Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, my apologies. So number A is code for phase 1 for just the Campbell building. We're building 345 spaces. Code requires 255.
Right.
90 spaces more, 30,000 a space, $2.7 million.
Right.
Now we go to phase 2. Okay. If you add phase 1 and phase 2, 341 spaces are required for this project. 341. We are proposing 345 in the garage, 44 under Chestnut, for a total of 389. That is 48 spaces over code for an additional cost to the developer of 1.2 million. Now the developer would like the option, instead of this scenario, to build a 5th level, which would create, instead of 345, it would be 435. We would be 94 spaces over code at a cost of about $2 million. So the fly in the ointment, so to speak, is the scenario here. I believe, and hopefully Charles would agree, the main contention is that if you build 85 units, the parking requirement would be 341 spots with a 4-level deck and 44 spots on top of the 345, that would be 389. We would only exceed code by 48 spaces.
Right. Okay. Okay, thank you.
I hope that clarifies the answers your question.
It does. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Trustee Schwingbeck. Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mayor. Evening, Mr. Purcell. So how many
Trustee.
times as a board have we reviewed this project?
Several.
I agree. And so I appreciate the determination of Mr. Adriani and the entire team. But you seem to be a little bit frustrated because the staff is trying to make sure that we have a quality development in the downtown. And that's kind of their charge. We want to have quality developments, and we think that we have a quality developer. So please bear with us while we ask some questions so that we can assure the residents in the entire village, but specifically that live in the downtown area, that we're looking out for their best interest, because there's lots of concern around our community.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Is financing in place?
Not yet.
Okay, because it sounded like from the Plan Commission that financing was in place with this new iteration.
No.
No?
Mr. Adriani, would you like to speak to that?
No, good evening, everybody. Financing is not in place. We don't have the approvals. We don't have the final plans drawn up to bid this out. And if it was understood to be financing in place of the Plan Commission, I did not see that at all or hear that at all.
Okay. Let's see if I can find it again before the end of the meeting, but let's move on. So I have several questions, and I think they're all around the same issues that Trustee LaBedz and Trustee Schwingbeck brought up. So the first one is with the garbage truck. So Charles had mentioned that there was some concern about whether or not the radiuses would work. Have you had an engineer work out the turning radiuses for getting in and out of the building through the Highland entrance?
For
under
garbage truck.
To go along Highland Avenue with the garbage trucks?
Is the garbage truck that's going to be removing the refuse from your property going to be going into your building, or
No.
just driving along Highland and stopping?
They would drive along Highland and stop just like they do to pick up refuse from Metropolis. Metropolis takes their garbage down that walkway there and comes out on Highland.
I understand. I'm not trying to create an adversarial relationship here.
Right.
I'm just trying to understand it in that, yes, that deck on Highland is clearly built so trucks can go under it. I was under the impression that the concept is that you guys wanted the truck to be able to go into the building. And so that's my bad, because I misunderstood that. So the truck is just going to pull along Highland, and someone is going to be there, or the garbage hauler will go into the building and pull out these bins?
Well, let me respond to not only the trash, but there will be deliveries for maintenance items for the Highland building that will in fact back into this area to take their trucks off of Highland while they unload. Okay, so
Like salt and equipment, correct?
exactly right.
Yes.
Okay, and so that's why we feel it's important to have.
Understood. And so have there been turning radiuses for trucks to be able to go into those doors, we'll call them overhead doors, on Highland into your parking garage to deliver salt, equipment, and other deliverables you need to maintain the property?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. When we talk about the parking, which I think is a lot of the concern that we have, or that's been brought up, I looked at some of what Charles put up there, and the numbers for the commercial space were really interesting to me, because you're talking about a restaurant of, let's call it 5,000 square feet. You don't have to haggle over 200 square feet, but just for round numbers, 5,000 square feet. And 3,000 of it is going to be for seating, which would seat about how many people, do you think?
Bruce, I don't know how many
I don't know.
people it would seat.
Basically, what we did was we calculated the parking spaces based upon the code.
Okay.
And I think actually all we really were required pursuant to the code was 19 spaces. By just trying to take a look. Yeah.
Yeah, the
So there's
code
probably, if I had to calculate, maybe 150, 160, 70 people in there for that many square feet, somewhere around there.
I'll agree with you on that. And I'll agree with the parking count that I saw when it came to diners. I think it was around 56 or something like that. What threw me off was the 7 employees. I mean,
Okay.
for that many people, clearly going to need more than 7 employees. And so that's why I was kind of questioning the numbers. And so I think that all we're trying to do is make sure that we don't have parking problems on Block 425 that then become an aggravator to the parking problems that we might have in the downtown overall. So when you look at the Chestnut building, which has gone from 4 to 5 stories, and there's talk about it, you know, maybe it's apartment, maybe it's going to be condo. We'll put that part to the side for a second. But if you stuck with the 4-story building, wouldn't a lot of the concerns of the planning department go away when it comes to parking?
Not necessarily, no. Because we feel that we have adequate parking for the whole development. And this is probably one of the largest, TOD developments in the northwest suburban areas. And the surveys that were done by the parking consultant, KLOA, we talked about Evanston, and Evanston does have a very vibrant town. They have the buses in town, but they also have a rail system too, as we do. Some of the things that weren't pointed out was the fact that with Uber and Lyft very prevalent today, or maybe not in the past year because of COVID, but very prevalent before, a lot of young people and a lot of people even middle-aged are getting rid of 1, maybe 2 cars, and depending solely upon public and Uber Lyft type transportation. Nobody else mentioned the fact that we talked about several years ago when we first came forth with this development. We talked about the zip cars. We would be having separate segregated areas for the zip car people to have in there. So if somebody doesn't have a car, they can rent a zip car for so many hours or maybe a couple of days at a time. So I think that this particular program, and also one of the arrangements we made was after the Campbell building to review all of our parking situation to find out exactly what we were requiring, and then create more spaces or less spaces if we needed them or not needed them. And that was something that I think everybody at the Plan Commission level and ourselves agreed upon. So that's something that's forward thinking in our respect, and I appreciate that.
I don't disagree with that at all. I will say that, it's kind of interesting that you bring up the Uber and the Lyft in the pandemic, because so many more people have purchased cars in the past year that didn't have cars, and you're having more people that are moving out of the city, whether it's pandemic or just the violence, and are moving to the suburbs, and lots of those people have cars. I think that there's something to be said for, being in close proximity and walking distance to the metro. But people still like to have vehicles to be able to kind of get around and do their shopping even on the weekends. So I don't disagree with you on that. So can you explain to me your system again on how so now if you have a mix, let me ask you this. The last time that we saw this plan, is it fair to say that the parking was different on the main level because you had more commercial space at that time, correct? So like the entire, at least first floor was all open, free parking, correct?
That's correct.
And it also is correct that we had retail also on the first floor of the Campbell building. We also had the whole second floor as office shared space type area too. And that's why the parking count for that development there was so high. So if you think that you're going from a high parking count back then to a lower count now, you're asking yourself, well, where are all the spaces for? A lot of those spaces, many spaces were for the commercial type use before that we had, that we do not have now.
Okay. That's not where I was going, but okay. So where I was going with this is that I need to better understand the system that you're going to have in place for, when maybe Charles, you could pull up the slide, or Mr. Vercel, you could pull up the slide that shows the green and blue parking spaces on the first floor.
Right.
Sure, I can answer that, Bruce.
Go
Okay.
ahead.
Basically,
I haven't asked the question, Mr. Vercel, if you don't mind. What I'm trying to get at is that you have green and blue on there, and so some of them are residential and some of them are commercial.
There we go.
Right?
Go back.
Go back one. There you go. So what prevents a resident who is stopping home really quick from, what prevents them, if they live in the building, from not parking in one of these commercial spaces because they have a fob? I mean, is there going to be any, other than signage inside the garage, there's nothing that prevents somebody who lives in the building from parking in one of the commercial spaces for a couple of hours and then goes back out, and then maybe when they come home later at night decides that they're going to park all the way up, park in a residential spot. Correct?
This is a gated entrance. The fob for the apartment dwellers will be utilized off of the Highland entry.
Okay.
The gates off of our courtyard entry will be specifically for the use of the commercial spaces. And that'll be a gated area where a ticket will be taken.
Okay, so there's
cameras in there also.
Bruce, may I add to that?
Sure,
something very, very important, Trustee Scaletta. When you pull into the garage in the blue, to go into the green, there will be a gate that you need a fob for. But if someone wanted to stay in the blue area, they can't get out without paying. And if you are not a customer with a stamped ticket from the restaurant or a retail establishment, there will be signs that say customer parking only, no public parking. That includes residents. It will cost them $25 to leave.
So there's no access from the blue to the, without going out the gate where you have to have a validated ticket?
Yes, the only way that someone in the blue who lives there can leave is they would have to take their key fob, go into the green area and circle around to get out, when it would be just as easy to have parked there in the first place in the green area and not worry about parking in the blue area. We will have a full-time engineer on site. I don't know if Deb Smart is in the audience, Mr. Mayor, but she may be able to explain it better than I. But the one example you gave, Trustee Scaletta, could someone who lives in the building say, I'm going to park in this blue area for a couple of minutes, then I'm going to go use my key fob to get into where I could have parked to begin with to get out? The answer is yes, they could do that.
Well, what I'm suggesting is that these are assigned parking spaces, right?
Yes, they will be.
Okay, so if I pull the straw and I'm parking on the 4th floor, okay, but but I want to stop at home for an hour or so, and I don't want to drive all the way up to the 4th floor, and I park in the commercial spot, there is no way of segregating that because they could always use their fob just to circle around and get out, correct?
Yes, except this first level that you see in green will in fact be the part of the guest parking for the residential. So if someone wants to park for a couple of minutes, they would, in all likelihood, not go all the way up to the 4th level, but park in the guest parking in this green area, okay, for a couple of minutes or an hour, and then go out that way.
Okay. I'm just looking at it and I'm concerned, and that's why I'm asking the questions, because if there's anything that you can do to put in place that would protect your parking so that your commercial spaces are always openly available, it'll only benefit your development.
You're 100% right, and that's why we will have it policed 24/7. Well, we won't have it policed from midnight to 6, but it'll be policed the other 18 hours of the day.
When you say
maybe we can utilize,
I mean supervised, not police, but it will be supervised with cameras, with personnel on site in the garage.
Okay. And then the last question I have for you, and I'll yield the floor. Can you explain to me the design of the Chestnut Building apartment versus condo? What would the number of units be if it was apartment versus the number of units if it was condo?
We believe the number of units for a condo would be somewhere between 50 and 55.
Somewhere
and 85 apartments. However, the parking ratio for condos is 1.7. So we did the study, and if we put 50 condos in there, it's almost identical to the same number of required parking as if you had the 85 apartments we're proposing.
However, the biggest challenge that you have is if it's apartments, the move in, move out. Because you are directly across from single family homes. And instead of having, somebody move into their unit and stay for years because they own it versus somebody renting an apartment for a year or maybe 2, you're going to have a lot more move in and move out, which is going to create more congestion on that street. So I'm hoping that these ultimately are condos, and you guys are always going to do whatever's in the best interest of making the project successful and feasible and viable. But I'm hoping that it stays condos, because I think that the congestion that would be created over there, if it were apartments, would not be one that I would be comfortable with living across the street. I yield the floor, Mayor.
Mr. Recklouse, did you have something to add?
Just a couple of points of clarification. I think there's a lot of reference to, the village's code requirements with parking. And I just wanted to point out that in this case, the code requirements are not that relevant. This is a planned unit development. And under a planned unit development, you generally look at the project holistically, and you look at whether or not it meets certain goals of the village. And in some cases, applicants in a planned unit development get relief from some provisions of our standard code. And in some cases, we say we're going to hold you to a different standard based on the provisions of, based on our goals. And we've been very clear, the board has been, staff has been from the get-go, that parking was something that we were concerned about, and that we were going to be looking. We did not, this is different than a development that's going in when you have a brand new parking deck that's not being utilized, when it's the last piece of downtown to be vacant. You have a different view of the availability of parking. And so throughout this process, we've used parking standards that we believe reflect this development's ability to self-park. And we're using very similar standards to what the applicant's own parking consultant is suggesting. And so, and I just want to make that clear that because this is a PUD, our standard parking code is not that relevant, that we're looking at this project holistically, and that's what a PUD is. And, so I think, the other aspect of the staff's recommendation is that after phase one is complete, it may be that they may not have to do anything beyond what the Plan Commission recommended. All we're saying is that the property owner shall provide details and data on the operation, management, and usage of the parking within the Highland Garage. And if parking issues arise, they would work with us on modifying the parking plan to address those. If we see a resurgence of Uber and Lyft and people walking and using bikes and scooters and whatever the case may be, and they don't need vehicles anymore, that would be reflected in that review. And then they could end up going with a smaller parking requirement as a result of that review. All we're saying as staff is that what we do needs to reflect reality and reflect what's actually occurring on that site at the time that we look at the development. And I don't know if Mr. Perkins wants to elaborate on that point, but I think it's important because we're throwing out these terms, and I want to just remind everyone this is a PUD, and there's a slightly different view of our code when a PUD is what we're discussing.
Yeah.
Okay, let me go to Debbie Smart very briefly. Deb, if you could just address that question that was directed in your way very briefly.
Good evening, Mayor and trustees. How are you?
Go ahead.
The main question I think is, well, there's two questions. One, regarding the move to Chestnut, if that actually ended up being an apartment, I certainly think the petitioner would probably consider extending that driveway entrance a bit also onto the Chestnut garage so that there could be a holding area for small moving vans so that we wouldn't necessarily always impede on the Chestnut Street. But that would be determined once we knew what the building was going to be about. I think that's kind of an important piece to know. And the second piece, just real quickly, we definitely had a very long conversation regarding the handicap parking in the garage. And as people who want to be easy as possible on people with disabilities, we honestly did feel that those parking spots in the Campbell garage needed to be preserved as handicap parking. And I do want to clarify one more point real quick from Charles. Trash cans on wheels are not the same as wheeled canisters, which are the big bins that I think people are thinking about. When we discussed this at the Planning Commission, we discussed the fact that we would be using these wheeled cans that you see janitorial people use to collect the garbage and trash both in the garage and on the common surfaces. And that would be going to this area in the garage. We would not be wheeling huge canisters across the brickway over to that Campbell garage, just so everybody's aware. Okay, thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Now, Trustee Canty.
Thank you. Randy, I want to thank you for clarifying the code discussion. That was going to be one of my very first questions, was why we are talking about the code when this is a PUD and nothing else. So I guess my question, Mr. Forsell, would be to you. I'm excited about this project, but we do need to get it right. But what is the issue with going with staff's recommendation and waiting for the data to come in to see what the actual requirement will be for parking?
There are a couple of issues. Number one, if we know that I guess it's approve the 385 plus 44, and if we don't need it, we'll come to you. But if it's not sufficient, this is all that we have to build. That would never happen, although people might think that it could. We can't build a development where our tenants and our buyers don't have a place to park their car, or we will never sell or rent a unit. So what the dilemma is in this development is the same dilemma, which is why we are here: money. We cannot afford to spend $2.7 million or $2 million on parking spaces we may never need. Now, the come back to us when we see what the need is means that we would take 18 months to 2 years to build and fill the Highland building, see what the demand for parking is, do a study over a period of months, and then come back, which means we would not be able to start planning to build that Chestnut building for 3 to 4 years. Okay? Because if we know now, or if we get an indication in the next 18 months to 2 years when we start leasing it, that there's a huge demand for apartments, okay, we may very well just build the 5th level now. Because keep in mind that the construction of the deck, the parking garage will not start until the building, the Highland building, is about halfway built. It takes half as long to build that 4-level deck as it does to build the whole Highland building, the whole Campbell building. Okay, the Campbell building is a massive in terms of it's tall, it's 10 stories, it's got an infrastructure underneath. It takes a long time to build one of those, about 18, 19 months. You can build this parking garage in 6 to 7. Okay, so the point of that is, Trustee Canty, is that number one, we need to know what our minimum number of spaces that we would have to build in order to A, get financing, B, start in advance of knowing what the final count is going to be, okay? Or what the usage is going to be. That's what I mean by final count. What the end usage is going to be by those who will be living in the Campbell building. And so we are proposing to build these extra 44 these 44 parking spaces. Now, I certainly understand, as we all do, that this is a PUD. Okay. We also have a huge issue, and we can stay as long as the board would like to stay, to discuss the credibility of the parking counts that staff did using Arlington Downs as a basis for their study for this project. That was left off the slide you were shown. The numbers are just simply not accurate. And the reason our parking consultant delivered the reports that he did is because that is what the village staff required him to do. It wasn't our idea. They said, we want you to give us an hourly, hour by hour, 7 days a week, weekday and weekend, of what the usage will be based on our code and what they call the ITE counts, or International Traffic Engineering counts. That's what the staff used partially. That's what our consultant used partially. No one in this meeting today knows what the ultimate outcome is going to be. But our problem with waiting to come back is that it will put us way behind the curve if we want to get started on that building sooner. So what happens if we have great success, which we hope we have? Mr. Adriani says, I want to build the 85 apartments, okay? But I want to put 44 spaces underground, and he comes back in a year and a half, and we don't have the data to know what the actual usage is. Therein lies the problem.
I guess, so I don't want to get into a real argument about, you know, who required what in the parking study. That sounds pretty standard to me for parking studies, that you would go hour by hour, 7 days a week to see what's required, and that you would use various sources. So that, right, I'm just going to tell you right off the bat, that sounds pretty standard to me. And I've worked in the construction industry as well in my legal career. So none of that sounds out of the ordinary to me. But I guess my question would be, is it really likely that the spaces would go unused? I mean, you've been in these meetings and worked on a few developments here around town. Parking is always a concern, right? So I don't think that anybody would ever say that you would build parking for our downtown area that would not get used, right? That it wouldn't be put to good use. And so I guess that's what I'm struggling with a little bit, right? Is I think that there's a middle ground here, and the suggestion is somehow that we're asking for parking to be built that would not be used, but none of us can predict the future, and I find it unlikely that parking would not be used in our downtown area, right? So I guess, is there a way to kind of solve both problems? Why not just build the 5-story now? And then, right, because you're asking for the option to be able to put the 5th story on, right?
Correct. Let me answer, Mike.
Sure.
One of the reasons that we also, it costs a lot of money to build that 5th level now. One of the reasons that we're back here for is to try to figure out a way to bridge our underwriting, because of the fact, if we can save that money there, that means our underwriting requirements will not be as great. Even though if we beef up the foundation for our 4 levels, it'll be able to carry that 5th level down the road. And we also then at that point have the ability to put the parking underneath Chestnut at that point too. There's 44 spaces that'll be underneath there. And I don't mind doing that down the road, but right now it'll be more costly to do the 5th level right now. That's all we're trying to say. And with the 345 spaces that'll be on the 4 levels, you know, we satisfy all the requirements for our retail areas and for our 234 units of the Campbell building. So and the ability to work with the program to evaluate things down the road, I think that gives everybody the flexibility to come together, find out what we need, and then work out the solution.
Okay, so I'll just say this last point and then I'll yield the floor. It sounds to me like you and staff are actually asking for very similar things, which is, we don't know exactly what is going to happen in the future, and we would like the option to ensure that we get the parking right in this development, right?
Exactly.
And this is our last chance to do that, right? So I guess what I would say is, you know, I think that staff is asking for the same thing that you're asking for, is what it sounds to me. And so I'm inclined to go in that direction. I want this project to succeed. I think it'll be great for our downtown, but we only have one chance to get this right. And I cannot have meetings 10 years from now with people complaining about the lack of parking downtown because we didn't put in enough and we didn't give ourselves the option to make sure that we had enough parking.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Baldino.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for all the discussion about the parking. I think, you know, a lot of these concerns are relevant and worth discussing. For me, I think, you know, I've been trying to take it all in. The whole parking discussion in the materials that we were given was a little confusing, and so from that perspective, I appreciate the discussion. But I think the part that struck me the most or resonated the most with me is when Mr. Purcell said that, this is about making money, and you're not going to make money if you don't provide enough parking. I think that is an absolutely true statement. Trustee Canty was talking about not having enough parking for downtown, and I just wanted to make it clear that we're not talking about enough parking for downtown. We're talking about enough parking for this project. Okay, just to be clear, we're not talking about the greater downtown parking. We don't want this project to overflow, but at the same time, it's just this project that we're talking about. Having said all that about parking, my original support for this project was based on the project being right-sized for this parcel. And part of that had to do with the number of stories that were on Chestnut. And so it should not be a surprise to anyone that I'm concerned about adding a fifth level on the Chestnut building. Having said all that, not to keep flipping around, but I think that this project is important. I think this project is important for the downtown. I think this project is important for the village as a whole. And I think, as has been said before, that it is also very important that the developer, Mr. Adriani, is complying with our affordable housing ordinance. And I think that having a local developer is fitting into that. And so I am willing to compromise on my stance for the building height on Chestnut. If it comes down to one pertinent question to me, and I said this to a couple of folks, and I don't ask this question to be combative or to be sarcastic. My question is, if this moves forward, if this PUD is approved, what is the likelihood that this project is going to move forward?
I think that's a great question, Mr. Adriani. We anticipated this question, and so Mr. Adriani, please.
Well, as I mentioned before, the steps to take, number one, are big steps, especially coming out of the COVID situation that we all have. We have this plan before us right now, and it will get to the next stage by having the plans be drawn, going to our construction company that we've been working with, Power Construction, to get us bids and then go out for financing at that particular point. And based upon everything that we can draw together, that's the point in time that we'd like to be, is where the financing avails itself to us. So how does it get built? Just like all our other developments that got built before. It just takes a lot of work by everybody concerned.
Oh, and I appreciate the amount of work that you put into this, the blood, sweat, and tears, and the number of times that you've had to come before this board, planning commission, design commission, housing commission. I very much appreciate all that. But I don't think I heard an answer to my question. I know that there's a lot of hoops to jump through, and there's a lot of uncertainty. But what is your feel for the likelihood that this is going to move forward? What is your feel for when you're going to move forward? Do you have a warm and fuzzy feeling, or is it a nervous feeling that you're teetering on the brink?
No, I don't think the feelings are nervousness. I think they're realistic feelings that we all have about undertaking different developments that we do. Number one, we do have one thing that we had the past couple of years, COVID. That's huge right now. okay? We also have increase in construction costs coming out right now. Lumber costs are going very, very high. Just go to Home Depot or Lowe's, wherever you buy lumber, and you'll see the differences. Steel, you have a company like Amazon buying 40% of the steel that's going to be coming into this country for some of their warehouses, et cetera. It's so we do face a lot of hurdles, but yet we jump over them. You know, it takes us a while to ascertain where we're at. So financing, that would be one of the hurdles we jump over. Just like tonight, we're before you, and hopefully we can face this hurdle with adversity and clear it.
Okay. Well, I want to echo some of the other sentiments from some of my fellow board members that I really want to see this project move forward. And I'm supportive of the recommendations of the Plan Commission, and you know, it's just there's no such thing as a perfect project, and so just like everybody else, I have to be willing to compromise and try to get the best project moving forward that we can. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Trustee Baldino. Other questions or comments from the board before we go to the audience? Trustee Rosenberg.
You may. For Mike or Charles, I think it's the 19, is it, let's see, I'm just trying to remember. 12 spaces, I think it was, that residential tenants and guests will be used. The term was, I think it implied that there was both residential tenants and guests would use 12 spaces. I think it was
under the affordable program.
No, that's I can answer that, Trustee Rosenberg. That's the analysis breakout of the residents and guests. So under our analysis, there would be 12 guests associated with the residents, and then the remainder would be the residential parking. They all should park in the 289 spaces allocated for the residential is what staff is recommending. And that comes to the 1.3 ratio, which, you know, I take exception to what Mr. Fussell said. We didn't use the Arlington Downs formulas. We used the hour by hour allocation only. We've used the exact same formula for this as we did 2 years ago, as HNTB did with Village Green Development 10 or 15 years ago. So it's no different on how we looked at it. And we're not recommending that they build the 5th level now. We tried to, you know, agree with the developer on the flexibility. They could build it now, they could build it as a separate addition, or they could build it when they add the 85 units. We also try to add additional flexibility to have them prove up enough parking. The main area we disagree on is the 85 units with only 44 spaces. We're just not convinced without additional data that that ratio at 1.09 spaces per unit, which is what it would equate to, it doesn't meet the standards that KLOA has provided on the 24 or so studies from other towns. It doesn't meet the average, and it doesn't meet what we've seen. And if you recall, our study that we did was just like 2 years ago that Rich and Associates did that resulted in the village spending a lot of money on the parking guidance system that I referenced earlier.
Okay, I'm not sure I got the answer. So
we agree with him, Mr. Trustee Rosenberg. 12 spaces for guests is a reasonable estimation of what the guest parking would be.
So when a tenant has a guest, do they receive a special placard or something that indicates that that's a guest space, or how is that so designated?
I would have to defer to Deb as to how that they would gain entrance into the guest parking. These are the finer points we will work out with our management company, as well as the electronic controls for the for the garage. The systems today are just simply amazing, that a resident might be able to call down and say, this person's coming in. I'm giving them a code to punch in. When they punch in that code, allow them to come in. And that is one system I've used and I have seen. So there are many different methods that they could implement. I'm not sure we've gone into that greater detail yet.
Okay. And from the standpoint of the commercial area, that we're going to have commercial and the restaurant, is there also anticipated the restaurant on the rooftop also still?
No, there will be no restaurant rooftop.
Okay. So it's only on the first floor then?
That's correct.
Okay.
In the Campbell building only.
Correct. Okay. And as far as for employees of the commercial / restaurant space on the first floor, they will be given passes, so to say, that their employers will purchase, and they will park then in that building?
Yes, it's kind of like when you buy a permanent pass to park downtown, you get a card.
Okay.
And you just put the magnetic card up against, and it lets them in and lets them out.
So will there be, is that part of the 56 spaces that were designated?
Yes, for commercial employees, yes.
Okay. And we feel that that number is sufficient then, based upon the projections and things for that space?
I think staff and we, you might find, only have one real basic disagreement on this entire parking issue.
Okay, it's the Chestnut. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then from the standpoint of trash pickup, so it was mentioned that the trash pickup would be 5 days a week, if I recall from the Plan Commission.
That's correct.
Correct? Or maybe that's not your forte again.
It certainly is not. I'm just reiterating what Deb said at the Plan Commission.
Well, I mean, one of the concerns I had was, from the standpoint, if you have a trash pickup every day, is there going to be a truck backing up like a typical garbage truck, with the beep, 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 back up every day for 5 days a week, pulling trash out and, creating a lot of noise potentially at 6 or 7 a.m. as far as, I'm not sure what the restrictions were. So.
Debbie Smart, can you answer any of those questions?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I can. Well, first of all, trash pickup down here is 5 days a week for all the other buildings down here, Trustee Rosenberg. Okay. And one of the things that is important about the middle area that we're looking at for some of our trash is we moved it to the middle so that it would be away from the Campbell building and not beep, beep, beeping so much. So that's actually one of the reasons to move it to the center of the garage. But today, every building down here actually gets 5 days of trash pickup and 2 days of recycling for every building that's a high rise down here, just so you're aware.
Okay. And is there any concern that overflow of parking from the Campbell building would overflow into the Vale garage?
Well,
there may be some.
Apparently there is. So let me refer back to something that Trustee Scaletta referenced early in the meeting about a little bit of frustration. And if I showed that, I do apologize. That wasn't the intention. The concern is that for some reason, this project is from both a residential, which I understand and agree with, but also on a commercial basis for 7,500 square feet, has to be an island unto itself, where all the employees, all the valet, and even the customers are accommodated on site. And the problem with that is, where else in Arlington Heights is that required? Where else is a restaurant required to provide its own parking for its own customers, build a garage and pay for them to park there? That's part of the concern that we just don't feel in that one respect we're being treated the way other enterprises in the downtown of Arlington Heights are being treated. And that is, we will do whatever makes sense for our customers, for the village. And of course, it's your village. You make the rules. We will follow the rules if we can. And we'll do the very, very best that we can to do so. But I think I would be remiss on my client's behalf not to state what that element of concern is. And so I put that before you.
Yeah, no, I don't, I understand what you're saying. I was just querying as to, what the ramifications are, so we potentially may be aware of those in the future, so.
We don't believe there will be any ramifications based on what we are proposing here.
Okay. That's good. Question as far as the affordable housing so there was reference, is it perpetuity or is it 20 years?
Perpetuity.
It is perpetuity.
It's what your code says.
Was there not some reference to 20 years though?
It was, I believe there may have been in our prior PUD.
Okay.
Or maybe we proposed that and the Affordable Housing Commission had an issue with it. And that's one of the items that we looked at your ordinance as a whole. And allow me to say that once we sat back and studied that ordinance after the meeting, we found it to be a fair ordinance. And I hope other municipalities copy yours verbatim, because it is a good ordinance. And that's why we've now agreed to follow it.
No, because in the information we were provided, there was some reference to a 20-year term in there. So I was a little unclear as to that. So, well, thank you both for bringing the project to Arlington Heights, and hope things can go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Padovani.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Adriani. Thank you, Mr. Purcell, for coming back and continuing with this project. I guess we all realize there's no guarantee, even if we do approve it, there's no guarantee that you might get that financing. You have to go out there and take a swing of the bat every time you go up to the plate. And I sure hope you can do it this time. And just for my own understanding now, I've listened to everybody, and my fellow trustees and the staff and you all have done a wonderful job, including with the help of Debbie Smart there, wonderful job of explaining all the details and the questions I had. I just want to clarify with you now, phase one is, how would I say it? The parking for phase one is more than adequate. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And phase one is going to take a while to get done. 2 years, 3 years?
Phase one might take the Campbell building would probably from start would take maybe 18 months.
Okay. And then
maybe about 9 months in is when we start the garage.
Okay. And 18 months to finish it, and then move in and getting a sense of where you are with the success of the Campbell building might be 2 years out.
Correct.
It'll be 30 months out. It'll take a year to stabilize the building.
Okay. And at what point would you decide to move on to phase two?
Based upon the success, number one, of the Campbell building.
And is that fully rented or half rented, or some trigger point there, some threshold?
I don't know exactly at this particular point. Probably when it's about 80-some% and you see the velocity increasing at that point,
Okay.
is when
There
the
you
next building, next phase should begin.
Okay. Now, and so that 80% threshold might be 3 years more, maybe more out, depending on how quickly people rent up and the market conditions of the time, of course. Is it possible that phase 2 might be put off longer because you're waiting for phase 1 to fully mature?
Yeah. If we have a recurrence of something like COVID, that's one of the reasons why, it's one of the reasons why we never started. And fortunately, we didn't start, because if COVID would have started at the time that we had construction underway, it would have been very difficult for everybody concerned. So right now, I think a take and see attitude at the 80% that was previously mentioned, and then go from there, I think would be a good point. So
Okay.
30 months from now would be, hopefully we can get back to you and say, we're ready to start our parking situation. We see the success it's had and go forward with next building on Chestnut.
Okay. So what I'm hearing then is phase 1 will go forward and some threshold will trigger you to start the Chestnut building. And at that time, you'll probably have pretty good experience with the parking.
Exactly. I think so.
We hope so.
Yeah, good or bad. I'm not saying it's going to be bad because you've got an excess there. And that's the point where you would decide to put a 5th level on the parking garage if needed.
Unless we choose, the price is so dramatic in difference between adding it on and building it now, which we don't know fully quite yet. The recommendation is that we may very well just do the 5 levels now, which is what I'm sure Charles would like to see us do. And then there is no issue whatsoever. The problem is the advanced cost of that, waiting to recover that cost until the Chestnut building is completed. Hence, that's why we wanted the flexibility of build it now, build it later, and the like. One thing that I do want to add to what Mr. Adriani said about the velocity and decide what to do. I represented the folks who did the zoning at Sigwalt 16. Far be it from me to think that they would get $850,000 for a townhome plus. So if prices like that keep going up, it may very well behoove us to do condos. And that's just what we just don't know yet.
But you're taking the risk is what I'm getting at here.
No question.
You all, Mr. Adriani, you're taking the risk there. And we all hope that will pay off for you. So giving you this flexibility is the best chance for you to find that financing that you're going to need to get this thing off the ground. Is that correct?
I agree with that, yes.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to come to that from my own understanding of where we can help you and where you can help us. So thank you, Mayor.
All right. Thanks, Trustee Padovani. Anything else from the board? I see no other hands, so I'm going to go to the audience at this time. Any members of the audience wish to address the board on this item? Mr. Moons, and I just remind everybody that we do have a 3-minute time limit, so Mr. Moons.
Thank you, President Hayes. Yeah, I just want to register a comment of my disappointment that once again, due to conflict of interest, a trustee had to recuse himself on a vital vote that's very important to our village. We all know that the board is a representation of the whole, and so residents, have lost 11% of the representation on this board vote right now due to that trustee's recusal. In my opinion, we elect our trustees to represent us, not to sit in the back room, for their own business interests. So I just wanted to register that comment. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Moons. And just in response, I mean, there are times when every member of this board is going to have to recuse themselves on something. So there's just no way that you can guarantee that a sitting board member is going to be able to register a vote on every single issue. It's just not going to happen. So thank you. Any other comments from the board or from the audience on this agenda item? All right, seeing no other comments from the audience, I'll come back to the board for any further comments or questions or a motion. Trustee Scaletta.
So I think that I want to make a motion, and I kind of want, listening to my fellow board members, I think I've heard most of you right. I think that that I'm going to make a motion, and I'm talking it out so that I'll get there, but that my motion is going to talk about that we allow the access along Highland for the garbage, and that so that I'd be agreeing with the Plan Commission. And the only exception I think I'll take with the Plan Commission is that I think that we should have an option to take a look at the parking after the completion of the Chestnut Building. The petitioner seems to understand that and wants to have some flexibility. Charles, obviously prefer to have it done now. The developer is deciding whether they want to do it now or whether they want to do it later, but I think that there would be some flexibility. So I'm just working out the, give me 1 second. I'm just working out the actual language so that I'm consistent with what we're supposed to be doing. So bear with me. Charles, just to be clear, based on what I said, would be a concurrence with the Plan Commission recommendation with the phase B. Would that be consistent, Charles?
I think that you're going to have to come back for the parking no matter what, Bruce. It's just.
So, Trustees Scaletta.
Agree to do it.
Hold on 1 second. Mr. Fursell and Mr. Adriani, you're not on mute. We can hear your conversation, so please mute yourself. Thank you. All right, go ahead, Mr.
Charles.
Perkins. Mr. Perkins.
Yes, thank you, Trustee Scaletta. So I think the service area on Highland, that's eliminating condition 11, which was the Plan Commission recommendation. And then I'm not sure on the question on the Plan Commission recommendation regarding the parking.
Well, the gist of what I want to do is I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to reevaluate the parking after the Chestnut Building, or after the Campbell Building is up, to determine whether or not the parking is sufficient prior to the construction of the 5 stories on Chestnut.
All right. Trustee Scaletta, hold on 1 second. Let me go to Trustee Canty, who hopefully will solve this problem.
I was going to say, I think I understand where you're going, John. So what you're saying is that you would move to accept the recommendation from the Planning Commission to eliminate condition 11, but with the modification that we accept the staff proposal that we wait and obtain the real data to determine whether we need the additional parking of the 5th level and or the 44 spaces under Chestnut. Is that where you're going?
Yes. You want to make the motion? Because you just said it better than I was trying to.
That's it. That's the motion. That is it.
All right.
Could you repeat that one more time?
Yes.
Canty, thank you.
Yes. So we move to accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission to eliminate condition 11 with the modification that we will accept accept staff's proposal to allow the development to move forward and to reevaluate the necessity of parking by adding a 5th level to the garage or the 44 spaces under the Chestnut building based on actual data at that time.
At the evaluation time.
Correct.
Evaluation time.
All right, that's Mr. Passman, did you have some suggestion?
Well, I have a question, but I want to wait to see if there's a second to the motion before I go any further.
Second.
Yeah, okay, there's a motion by trustee Canty, seconded by trustee Scaletta. Go ahead, Mr. Passman.
My question is, it's a much question for trustee Canty as anyone, is who and how will that determination be made before they can start on Chestnut? Will that be something that comes to the village board? Do you envision?
No.
Yeah.
So staff's recommendation was that it's a conversation between staff and did not have to go through the full process at that time.
Okay, so you'll leave to staff to determine whether, based on data, as part of the construction of the Chestnut building, the developer will be required to either build the 44 underground spaces or the 5th floor, or presumably neither, or I suppose.
Or both. Yes. Yes.
I wanted to clarify that process. Okay.
Before Mr. Passman goes away, can I ask him a question, Mr.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Mr. Passman, in the event that Charles is adamant about one thing and the developer is adamant about another, is there any relief that the developer can seek through the board process?
If it's the will of the board, we could certainly write that into the ordinance that approves the amendment, if that's ultimately approved by.
I mean, I'd like to see it done administratively, but I also don't want the developer to walk away going, all right, Charles, I'm going to have to do this. But if Charles got hit by a bus tomorrow and they were dealing with a new director of planning and the person wasn't seeing eye to eye with the developer, I just want the developer to feel comfortable that, that there would still be some remedy in being able to come see, seek relief from the board.
I would suggest, Trustee Scaletta, that I would, the board, I would write in either the ability to appeal to the village manager or to the village board, depending on this group's desire.
Trustee Canty?
Yeah, sorry, I had to make sure I wasn't on mute. Yeah, I think that we could include that and that would be just fine and would be consistent with the motion that was on the floor.
All right, and that's okay with trustee Scaletta as the seconder?
Yes, sir. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Right, okay. And trustee Schwingbeck.
Thank you, Mayor. So I guess one comment I have, I was ready to maybe put a different motion on the floor, but I'd like to hear what the petitioner thinks of. Are you okay with this?
Well, as stated before, I think we always see eye to eye with staff and on most things. In this particular statement here, that we get together later on and figure out exactly what our requirements should be based upon certainty of the previous time period that everybody's using the parking, I think is a good idea. And also one step further to go before the village board, I think that's important also.
Okay, because as Trustee Baldino said earlier, I'd like to see this project move forward in shovels in the ground. And you've obviously spent a tremendous amount of time on this project, and so have we, as well as our village staff. So if you're okay with that, then I'm fine with that motion and second.
Okay, trustee LaBedz.
Just a quick clarification to that point from Mr. Passman. So did we agree that it will go to the village manager or the board, or is it going to be written in as it will be either one, or are we making a decision now it will be to the village board, or the ordinance will say it will be to the village manager if it comes to a point where there's some disagreement to be worked out because poor Charles got hit by the bus? Sorry, Charles.
I'm getting my license tomorrow, Charles.
Trustee LaBedz, it could go, any of this is fine. I understood that it would go to the manager, then the board. I thought that the goal was to try to avoid them having to come back to the board except if staff, truly took a position, after the director, then the manager, and they just felt aggrieved. So we work in a multi-layered process.
Okay,
Mr.
I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, I thought it goes to staff and manager and then to the board should there be
Okay.
any types of disagreements.
That's fine. I just want to be sure I understood what the
Mike, is
process
that
was.
okay, Mike?
What, you're the boss.
No.
I think that the ultimate resolution of this is called kick the can. And I don't think we have a choice but to do that because we don't have the data today. And we don't know what we're building, when we're building it. And we don't know what the parking situation is going to be. So I believe the most rational, acceptable resolution is what Trustee Canty and Trustee Scaletta have put forward.
All right, anything further from the board? Let's go ahead and just restate this motion then, Trustee Canty. My understanding is it's concurrence with the Plan Commission recommendation, except for, go ahead.
To accept staff's recommendation that the developer at the time that the Chestnut building is being built, real data will be used to determine what additional parking, if any, is needed, whether that is a fifth level on their existing parking structure and or additional 44 spaces under the Chestnut building, or both or neither, with the parties agreeing that, or excuse me, with the ordinance to state that if the parties cannot agree, it can be appealed to the village manager. And if that is not sufficient, it can then be appealed to the village board.
Okay.
Second.
There's a motion by Trustee Canty and seconded by Trustee Scaletta. Further questions or comments from the board? Anything?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I'm not sure it's splitting hairs. I don't have the number 12 directly in front of me, but what Trustee Canty stated, with the exception of, accept the recommendation of staff, because what you stated and what we have agreed to do isn't exactly what the staff recommended. Okay.
Right. Right.
So I would like to suggest you take out that leave everything in except adopt staff's recommendation, or it's really the board's recommendation stating what you just said, Trustee Canty. It's not verbatim what staff recommended. Charles, am I splitting hairs or am I correct?
The board's recommendation is pretty close. There's some differences where we talked about the 1.3 ratio and things like that. I think that'll be reflected in the ordinance that Attorney Passman will draft to reflect the motion here. So I think we're pretty close and pretty consistent. Our intent was not to have you start back up Plan Commission again. So having that language in there is important. So yeah, I think the flexibility is there, which we talked about. It's not exactly as we had staff had recommended, but I think it's a pretty good motion.
Yeah, I do too. I think you are splitting hairs. So, Mr. Ecklaus.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to say, my understanding, just so when we're drafting the ordinance, we understand that the board is going with the Plan Commission's recommendation, with the exception of the issue of what parking requirements are going to be applied to the Chestnut building. In that instance, they're going with the staff's recommendation with the added caveat that if the applicant is unhappy with department staff's determination, they can appeal that determination to the village manager and then to the village board.
And that is clearly not my understanding.
What's the will of the board on that one?
All right, well, we have a motion and a second. So
Discussion.
I'm not sure
Mike?
what the disagreement is.
Could you please put up, Charles, number 12?
Mayor, would you like me to do that?
Yeah, please do.
Somehow I lost my Zoom connection. Here we go.
Excuse me. I'll just have to start again 1 second.
There we go.
If I could, Mayor, I mean, I think, what we're really asking is Trustee Canty and Trustee Scaletta, what is their intent of their motion? If what I stated is not what they intended, then, obviously they can restate it any way that better reflects it.
From my perspective, if I may.
Wait, now who's speaking? Now let's stick with the motion maker and the seconder. Is there anything you'd like that's inconsistent?
No.
No, Randy said it the way that I
Correct.
agreed with.
With what the village manager said you agree with?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
I agree also.
All right. All right, so we are in agreement and the motion is clear. Correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So we have a motion and a second. Let's take a roll call.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Well, it took a while to get there. It wasn't the 3.5 hours that it took the Plan Commission, but still, it was a worthwhile discussion, and I'm glad we went through it. And again, as I said earlier, I am very much looking forward to seeing shovels in the ground. So hopefully this is another step in that action plan, and that you guys will move forward with undue haste to make this a reality. I know we all want to see that happen. So we very much appreciate your dedication to this project. And again, let's keep moving in the right direction. So good luck to you.
Thank you.
Mayor Hayes, I appreciate being before you and the board today. Thank you very much for your assistance in this matter and in our faith and in your faith in us. We appreciate everything that you do for us. And likewise, hopefully we can return the favor.
Yes, we
All
look
right.
forward to it. And thank you and the staff. Although Charles and I go way, way back, we don't agree on every single issue. He is a gentleman. We put it out there. The board has made a decision, and we're very, very comfortable that it is the right decision. And it's such a pleasure to work in this village. You guys really know your business. So thank you so much. And thank you, Randy, and Mayor Hayes.
All right. Thank you all. Have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have some other business to conduct, so we'll move on to legal. And we do have an item regarding the amendment to the Class J liquor license for Metropolis and authorizing the use of the village right-of-way. So, Mr. Reckles, you want to start off with this?
Yeah, very quickly. We've been doing license agreements for many businesses so they can conduct business on our right-of-way as part of Arlington Al Fresco. What we discussed back in March for Metropolis is essentially that. What makes it different is that while most businesses conduct business, have their al fresco space, if you will, immediately in front of their business, Metropolis is going to be an altogether different location. Upon review with legal, it was determined that this was going to require them for us to amend our liquor code to allow a Class J liquor license, which is for a not-for-profit live theater, to serve on designated public rights of way during calendar year 2021. Generally we write ordinances generally like that. We are saying that then via resolution that the Metropolis Theater is allowed to serve on that particular stretch of Eastman that we discussed last time between Arlington Heights Road and Evergreen. And then we will be entering into a license agreement with Metropolis, just as we did with all the other businesses. The village preserves all the rights to end the process, end the experience, talk to them about their noise conditions, talk to them about any other impacts they have on the village generally, and revoke the license agreement for any reason. We retain that right, and they're very aware of that. So that we will require 2 votes on this issue, one approving the ordinance and one approving the resolution. And happy to answer any questions.
All right, are there any questions for either Mr. Ecklouse or Mr. Passman? All right, seeing none, we do need, as Mr. Ecklouse just indicated, 2 motions. One, first to approve the ordinance.
Move approval. Second.
A motion to approve by Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee Baldino.
No.
We'll give it to Rich. All right. Any further questions? Roll call.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. And now a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
Motion to approve by Trustee Canty, seconded by Trustee LaBedz. Any questions or comments? And nothing from the audience. Roll call.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. And thank you, Mr. Passman, for your consultation and advice, legal counsel in this unique issue. And then we would move on in the agenda to the report of the village manager. Randy, anything other than your request for closed session?
Not this evening, no, thank you.
Okay, anything from the board under petitions and communications? Seeing none, Mr. Trustee Rosenberg, almost Mr. Rosenberg.
Hey. 2 more weeks. So I just want to say thank you to everybody. And again, thank you, Mayor, for your kind words and accolades, and appreciate everything. And thanks to the public for all their years. And I'll see you on the other side, as they say.
All right, thank you, Bert. All right, if nothing further from the board, I'll go back to the village manager for his request.
Thank you, Mayor. I would request that we enter into closed session for 5 ILCS 120/2C21, discussion of minutes lawfully closed, whether for the purposes of approval of the minutes or the semi-annual review of the minutes, and 5 ILCS 120/2C1, appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel.
So move.
Motion to go into closed session as per the statutes enumerated by the village manager, by Trustee Baldino, seconded by Trustee Padovani. Roll call.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Well, thank you all for joining us this evening. We are now adjourned into closed session and will not be reporting back out. Thank you all.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, all. Adios.